Breath. Good morning, everyone. I'm Robert Torres, Pennsylvania Secretary of Aging, and on behalf of the Department of Aging, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Dementia Caregiver Symposium. Thank you for taking the time to learn new strategies, tools, and resources that can benefit caregivers of individuals living with dementia. I also want to thank the Alzheimer's Association, AARP, and the Pennsylvania Association of Area Agencies on Aging for convening this forum to highlight the important role that caregivers play in the lives of individuals living with dementia. Indeed, caregivers play a role in all of our lives, supporting families and communities in a variety of ways. The work they do is vital, but too often it is invisible. We need to change that. We need to hear our caregivers, see the value they provide, and support them. Unpaid caregivers of loved ones with dementia, who number about 500,000 in Pennsylvania, face a variety of challenges. With the many priorities that they have to juggle every day, finding time to focus on their own needs and well-being may often fall to the bottom of the list. Pennsylvania's Caregiver Support Program, which is operated by the Department of Aging and administered by the Area Agencies on Aging, can provide important services to support caregivers in their caregiving relationship. I'm proud that Pennsylvania has been a national leader in the development of supports for caregivers. And now, thanks to the legislative leadership and the advocacy of many partners, especially the Alzheimer's Association, AARP, and the Pennsylvania Association of Area Agencies on Aging, we are in a position to help even more caregivers utilize the program. Earlier this year, our department was proud to support the passage of Act 20 of 2021, which has expanded how the program can meet the needs of caregivers by allowing greater flexibility in the administration of the program. Troy Johnston, who directs the Caregiver Support Program at the Department of Aging, will be talking to you later about the program and other department resources. I hope you will consider how to utilize the Caregiver Support Program and these other resources to meet the unique needs of your caregiving situation. I want to close by thanking caregivers for all that you do to fulfill this vitally important role in the lives of family and other loved ones. Please know that my department is committed to working with our partners to support you through this journey. Thank you. Have a safe and happy holiday season, and please enjoy the rest of the symposium.
Hello, my name is Rebecca May Cole. I am the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Association of Area Agencies on Aging. Many of you know us by the name P4A. P4A is happy to be partnering with the Alzheimer's Association and AARP to offer this virtual Dementia Caregiver Symposium. We hope you find this symposium valuable as you continue to provide care to your friends, neighbors, and loved ones with dementia. I hope you enjoy the program.
Hello, my name is Bill Johnston Walsh. I'm the State Director for AARP Pennsylvania. At AARP, we believe that caregivers like most of you aren't celebrated or supported enough. Thanks to you, older parents, spouses, and other loved ones living with dementia can live safely and well in their homes and communities. We know that caregivers have a big job, but we can help with some basic support and common sense solutions to make your big responsibilities a little bit easier. That's our goal today and every day. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Francel, and I am one of your two executive directors here for the Alzheimer's Association in the Great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are so grateful to all of you for joining us today. And to start off, I would really like to express my sincere gratitude to Secretary Torres. We appreciate your warm welcome this morning and everything that you've done to support us in our work at the Alzheimer's Association, especially this program from the very concept to our delivery here today. We also would like to thank Rebecca May Cole and Bill Johnston Walsh for their sincere, really caring about the work that we're doing for caregivers and how we can provide support to all of you in the work that you're doing every single day. We share such a strong partnership between the P4A, the AARP, and the Department of Aging in our collective work to connect each of our entities' priorities and support our shared constituency across the Commonwealth. With more than 500,000 Pennsylvanians caring for an individual with dementia, please know that you are not alone in the work that you're doing. We know it can oftentimes feel isolating, but you are together in this strong community across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania where so many others are sharing in the caregiving work that you're doing and the emotional, physical, and financial strains that we know caregiving can mean for someone who's providing that important care. Today's program will offer you perspectives and insights, resources, and information, ultimately to make sure that you know this community is here for you and all of these resources are here for you. To that end, we have such great panelists. It is my pleasure to be able to thank them live. Our first panel will be perspectives on caregiving, and this will feature caregivers who will share parts of their own journeys in terms of the roles and responsibilities, as well as insights that they can provide from their own personal experiences, literally things that they've lived and learned from that they can pass along to you. Our second panel is resources in your community, which will really dive deeply into resources that caregivers can access for support. So this panel discussion will be an excellent opportunity for you to walk away with some amazing tools and supports that will be there in the community for you beyond today. It took so many people to organize today's program, from our Alzheimer's Association staff and all of those that you just heard from with P4A, the Department of Aging, and AARP. I thank each and every one of you. I especially thank the panelists and moderators who will generously share their expertise and personal insights. We are so grateful for your efforts today and beyond today in everything that you do. And for all of you in attendance, please, please help us expand our reach. If you know somebody in your community who's caring for someone with some form of dementia or some other kind of care that they're providing, please make sure that they know about the resources and supports that are here for them as well. Before we begin, though, just a couple of housekeeping items and notes. Everyone is muted due to the size of our audience. So if you have a question, we ask that you place that in the Q&A tool. So please don't use the chat. Please use that Q&A tool. We'll be monitoring that, and you can find that at the bottom of your screen. It is my pleasure now to introduce the moderator of our first panel, and that is Miss Teresa Osborne. For more than 30 years, Teresa has advocated for the protections and rights for older Pennsylvanians with a variety of different local and state agencies. She currently serves as the manager of state advocacy for AARP in Pennsylvania. She is such a champion and amazing partner, and she leads the state office's legislative policy priorities on behalf of AARP Pennsylvania's 1.8 million members and all Pennsylvanians who are 50+ years old. So it is my pleasure now to turn the virtual podium over to Teresa.
Oh, Christina, thank you so much for that kind introduction. It's such an honor to be here with all of you today, and really such a blessing for me to be able to kick off our first panel by introducing our facilitator for panel number one, and that is an AARP colleague and friend, Amy Goyer. Amy is AARP's national family and caregiving expert and author of Juggling Life, Work, and Caregiving. Amy is really an passionate champion for caregivers. She has been one her entire life, adult life, caring for her grandparents, her parents, and her sister. Amy has more than 35 years of experience working in the field of aging, and she shares her personal caregiving journey as well as practical, actionable tips for caregivers in her columns and videos. She is a much sought after speaker. She moderates AARP's Facebook Family Caregivers discussion group that I also, as a caregiver, former caregiver for my mom and sister, get a lot of good out of every day that I join it. She is just an incredible person, and we are so honored to have her here with us today and joining with some incredible other Pennsylvania caregivers for today's first session. So Amy, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. It's just wonderful to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I always love working with AARP Pennsylvania. And of course, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. You know, the perspectives on caregiving panel discussion to me is just so vitally important. Partly because everyone who cares for someone with dementia can tell you that no two people experience it exactly the same way. And as you heard, I cared for both my grandmother back when I was in my 20s, and I was in college earning a degree at Ohio University, not too far from y'all in Pennsylvania. That's where I grew up, and I was earning a degree in music therapy. So I began doing a lot with my grandmother, who lived in Indiana, because she had Alzheimer's disease. Flash forward many years, and then my dad had Alzheimer's disease, and I turned my life upside down to care for him and my mom at home. But they had very different experiences. And I find that as Teresa mentioned, our AARP Family Caregivers discussion group on Facebook, I find that, I share a tip, something that worked for me with my dad, and then someone else will come in and say, try this. So every perspective from every caregiver can help someone, because it's like a puzzle we all have to put together. There's no one way to care for a loved one who has dementia. So that's why all our perspectives are so incredibly important to help us navigate the caregiving journey. And that's why we're so fortunate today to have some incredible and courageous caregivers from throughout Pennsylvania with us to share their varied perspectives. So I'd like to welcome 3 family caregivers to join me now: Diane Powell, Rhonda Madison, and Peggy Gelsinger. All y'all there, and you can unmute your cameras, and can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi. So I would like to start out by just asking each of you to introduce yourselves. Tell us who you've been caring for, or who you've cared for in the past, caring for now. And who, just a little bit about your caregiving journey, because as I said, everyone's journey is a little bit different. Let's see, Peggy, do you want to go ahead and start?
Sure, I'll start. Hi, my name's Peggy Gelsinger. So my caregiving journey, it was for my mother-in-law, who has since passed away. So my wife and I's journey started in 2006. She lived with us for 4 years. Started out that we just had her at home, and we were able to manage for a few years. And we put her into a senior daycare type activity, which she seemed to do really well at. She actually enjoyed that. So she would go from like 9 to 3 during the day, and that seemed to go very well until it didn't. And eventually we did have to put her into a facility in around 2010, and she was there until 2020. And she passed away in 2020. But there were many ups and downs through those years.
Yeah.
It was very difficult, and I have just lots of goods and bads through those years. Suggestions that I would give to people are keep a journal of the things that work and that don't work. When she was home, we used to put a calendar on the counter, just so she knew where we were, because we were both working, what things were going on. We used to take her everywhere. When she was with us, she was a very outgoing type person. So we both played golf. We took her to the golf course. She used to ride in a cart with us. She had a good time when she was with us. Other things that we did, one of the things that, and today it's probably even easier, we buried a phone in her pocketbook. There was that concept of the kid's phone, something with a GPS. We buried it at the bottom so that if we possibly lost her, we had that find my phone feature that we were able to do. But in today's world, they have, Apple tags and those kind of things. So the concept of some kind of GPS to be able to keep track would be something I would recommend.
Yeah. These are all such great suggestions, and we're going to talk about some of those things throughout our discussion too. So I know you've got so many great things to share, and as you say, there's the joys and there's the challenges, and there's it's kind of a roller coaster, but I think I love that you point out that you did have a lot of fun, and I felt the same way with my dad. He lived with me for 6 years, and just getting him out, going grocery shopping, just doing the basic things in life could be really a lot of fun.
Yep.
So Diane, would you join us now and tell us a little bit about your caregiving story?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this morning's important session. My family was relatively fortunate in terms of our experience with dementia and Alzheimer's. We did get a diagnosis, and my father was given Aricept. He was fairly self-sufficient, meaning he was able to bathe himself, brush his teeth, dress himself, engage with people. He was very social. One of the things that we did notice was a decrease in his judgment, and so we weren't able to leave him alone or unattended. And he would wander the neighborhood and sometimes poke at the neighbor's dog, which caused irritation and annoyance on their part, which was understandable. They were extremely annoyed with that. So we required a lot of monitoring, but he was fairly good-natured and was able to engage with people. And when we had company, he loved it. He was a masterful storyteller. Unbeknownst to them, he would repeat himself a great deal, but his stories were very interesting, and it was from a time in his life when he was happiest. So people were really entertained by his storytelling. And one really scary episode was one time my mother fell and broke her hip, and my father wasn't able to call us to alert us that she was, found on the floor, unable to reach the phone. And fortunately, a sister came after work and was able to get them the care that they needed. We were supported by the fact that he was enrolled in a senior daycare program. And that really helped us a lot, because the van would arrive every morning and pick him up. And from like 9 to maybe 2:30 p.m., he would be at the senior care center, and they would let him feed the birds and do little activities that he really enjoyed. And it kept him entertained, and he was able to socialize with some other people. And that helped my mother a lot with the stress and the burden of trying to be a caretaker. But overall, we were fairly fortunate with our experience.
Diane, am I correct in remembering that someone mentioned to me that you also had a friend who had dementia that you've helped care for?
That's right. She began to show some disturbing symptoms in her phone conversations and when she would visit. And the decline was so rapid and shocking. It was really, really unsettling. Unfortunately, we never had the conversation with her about the fact that we noticed, the struggle that she was having with words and with socialization. Her husband would call us, and I did reach out to Area on Aging and managed to get a social worker in to do an assessment on them. But things with my friend really, really declined rapidly, where her hygiene suffered. She couldn't do daily chores around the house. She began to roam at odd hours in the morning, like very, very, very late at night, where the police would have to come and bring her home. So it was very shocking and disturbing to witness her decline, and she ended up in the nursing home and died shortly thereafter.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You've had some loss. We all experience loss as part of our caregiving journeys. It seems, and that those are two really important losses. And it sounds like she was a good friend. And your story brings to mind, we talk about the term family caregivers, and that's an umbrella term we use, but it includes friends. So we talk, you might be caring for a neighbor or just a close friend, or someone helping a friend care for their parents. Whatever your situation is, we still consider you a family caregiver. So thank you so much, Diane, for sharing that. And I know you're going to have a lot of good other tips to share as we go forward.
Thank you.
So I want to go ahead and invite Robin. And Robin, I apologize. They had given me a list with a typo on it, so I had your name wrong. It's Robin Madison, correct?
Yes, it is.
Great. Okay. So do you have your camera on, Robin?
I do. I can see all of you.
Here you are. Now I can see you.
Okay.
So sorry about that, Robin.
That's okay.
Tell us a bit about your caregiving journey.
Sure, thanks. So, of course, I am Robin Madison. I did care for my husband, Napoleon. We called him Paul Madison. He did pass away in April of this year. And my caregiving story is probably unique because my husband was 18 years older than me. So, you go into this marriage with your eyes wide open, like, okay, he's older than me. Something most likely will happen to him before it would happen to me. Never in my worst nightmare did I expect what happened. So I'm being a wife, a mother, his caregiver. I'm working full time. So I have a teenage son and I'm dealing with my husband. So I describe our battle as, or our story as a battle, and it really was a 7-year-long battle. I had to battle for about 2 years to actually get a diagnosis. We went to many different neurologists. They would be like, yeah, something's wrong, but we don't know what it is. They would just sort of brush you off. People were not compassionate, and they didn't take the time to listen to the symptoms. You know, you had your little 10-minute window to see the doctor, and it's really hard to get it all out during that time. So we ended up going to the University of Pittsburgh, to the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, which was a blessing for me because that's where I found out that he had Lewy body dementia. And it was important to me to have a name because I couldn't wrap my mind around what was going on. Sadly, by this point, though, I had lost my husband before I even knew what was wrong with him. And I really believe if I didn't go to the ARDC, he probably would have died and I would have never found out what it was. So they were that instrumental for us. We also tried Aricept. However, for us, it did not have good symptoms. It actually was the worst, the opposite. It made him more violent. So that wasn't an option for us, which, you know, I understand generally it helps folks. We just didn't have that experience. So then we move on to like the middle part of what I call our battle. You know, it's the new normal. You're trying to figure out how you deal with him. You're used to this person that's left. And then a little time goes on and you lose that person. Then you kind of get used to who's left, and then you lose that person. And then sadly, self-preservation kicks in and you're no longer attached. You're living with a stranger who does not like you, who you don't really like either. So a lot of his symptoms during this part were physical, more so with the Lewy body. He had Parkinson's-like symptoms. So he had more physical problems at this time. His memory was not so much of an issue at this time, but his personality had greatly changed. He went from being a fiercely independent man to being pathologically jealous of every move that anybody made, and especially me. I was definitely his target in what would go on. And I could be with him, he would be violent with me. Somebody would come into the room and he could turn it around that quickly, that he was, you know, perfectly lovely with other people. So I definitely got his frustration. Towards the end, and I would say the last probably year, about a half year, about 6 months or more of our journey, we were just in a battle to get care for him, end of life care. He had gone onto hospice. We did have him at home. And again, this was a unique situation because I'm raising a teenager, I'm working full-time at home, and we're caring for him full-time. So we get hospice, we go through some things. We had, he went to a respite, which was the first time we had been away from him. So for my son and I, it was like 4 days that we were on vacation because we could leave the house, we could freely do things. So that was a very odd situation for us because we weren't used to that. When they were going to release him from the hospice, they told me he needed skilled care. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, well, we found a facility near your house. I was like, okay, great. They're like, yeah, it's $10,000 a month. I was like, what? Help me again with that. So we brought him home because I, again, was in this position where, do I spend all of my savings on having somebody else care for my husband who's dying anyway? Or do I spend all of my money I had been saving to put my son through college and send him to college? So I had to choose my son and his future. So that was a unique situation to be in. Definitely was hard. My son, who was at home with me, we had some other help at the end, but definitely my son and I were on this journey with him for the most part. So tried to end things on a positive. So my son did make the decision that he would donate his father's brain for research with the ADRC because he's very scientific and he just believed that's the only way that's going to help somebody. And he was like, Mom, his brain failed him a long time ago. Maybe it can help somebody else. So I was extremely proud of him for making that decision. Also, another positive thing that came out of everything is I was always close to my son. However, the bond that we have now is like ridiculous. And you carry a lot of scars from what you went through, but we decided that, I decided to make a positive scar. My son wrote a paper for his freshman class, for an English class. He had to write about something that impacted his life. So he wrote, of course, about his father. But in the middle of it, he wrote about us. So to get my positive scar, I got a tattoo on my arm of something my son wrote about us. And it says, all we had was each other. I was his shield and he was my armor.
Oh, wow, that's incredibly, that gives me a visual as well as an emotional connection with what you went through together. And I think what you described between you and your son, that team, my sister was my team member in caring for my dad, especially, and my mom at the same time who had had a stroke. But I love that you bring up some positives. Mm-hmm. And my parents donated their bodies to science as well. And that was a sense of something good coming out of it. I'm sure that was kind of a comfort for you.
Absolutely.
Well, you talk about so many challenges and joy. So let's all talk about that. Let's dig deep into that a little bit more. There are so many challenges. It's kind of hard in a brief hour panel to really delve into them for all of you. But so let's talk about when things first started happening. I know, Robin, you talked about the fact that one of your biggest challenges was getting a diagnosis. That alone can be really, really hard for people. I know my dad actually had a really good doctor who had been doing exams with him on a regular basis. And my dad actually did start on Aricept very early on before we even knew he was doing so. And it did help him. But as you say, there were other medications that helped other people, which made my dad, have a terrible, terrible reactions. So that is one of the big challenges is medications. Diane, what have been some of the challenges that you've encountered, especially in the very beginning? Diane?
Yes, I'm here.
There you go.
The biggest challenge was trying to figure out what is wrong. My father owned a trucking business. So we were used to him driving trucks and being on the road and being able to navigate long distances. And the shock came when one day he called from East Liberty and said he couldn't figure out how to get home. And just, having to wrap your mind around what is going on? And those kind of scenarios began to happen too frequently. And he would have to describe where he was, and a family member would have to try to guess where he was and have him follow us home. So as time elapsed, you notice some changes in his personality. He would perk up when we had company and whatnot, but otherwise he did become a little withdrawn. His stories, he was very, very repetitive and would repeat behaviors over and over, always checking the doors to make sure they were locked, and just things that were just troubling to observe. And we were able to get him to a doctor who did make a diagnosis, but we didn't feel equipped to ask the right questions, really understand the nature of the disease. And we really struggled with, okay, where do we turn for help? How do we get this situation under control? Because it was really burdensome for my mother.
Yeah, and that is tough too, because you, as seeing her as a caregiver, and how it was affecting her, you kind of had two people to take care of.
Exactly. And at one point we did. They both went into decline. The situation became so bad until we got help. So they weren't eating properly. It got to the point where I would stop by their house in the morning and drop off food. And my sister would come after work and to check and drop off food. And the food would still be there untouched. So it was very, very challenging to get them to receive help and to find out where to get help.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Yeah.
And affordable help. You know, Robin, you mentioned the cost of care in a nursing facility, which was being recommended to you. That was, you know, just unmanageable for many, many people. And the costs can be incredibly challenging. You know, Peggy, how about you? What were some of the biggest challenges that you experienced, especially in the beginning?
I mean, I think to Robin's point, or to Diane's point about the repetitive behavior, I think the biggest thing is, you know, that we learned is, we learned, you know, it gets very frustrating for you as a person to hear it, but we learned that you have to take it in and you kind of have to like just listen and act like it's, you have to act like you heard it for the first time, because it becomes frustrating for you, but for them, they don't know the difference. So what we learned was, you know, you have to redirect the conversation. You have to, you know, take it to a different place, because it's only frustrating for you. It's not frustrating for them because they don't even know they're repeating it. So it's a really important skill to learn to just change the conversation, to make it something different so that it doesn't become a frustration factor for you as an individual. Because I think the biggest thing that I think we learned over time was it's much, much harder on the caregiver than it is on the person. It's and I see it. We have a very close friend that's going through it with her mom. And we have a few other people that we're seeing go through it at this point. It's much, much more difficult on the caregiver than the person that's going through it. So, you know, just be conscious of that. Make sure that you have a network of people that are available to you, and that you do have those people out there that can give you that reprieve. You know, just that hour a day, or you know, some just little bit of time that you have for yourself.
Let's talk more about that. I wanted to talk about a team. I strongly believe that there's no way any of us can do this alone, and we try to all too often, and that we have to build a caregiving team. And one of the things I hear the most from family caregivers is, but I'm all alone. I don't have any siblings who are helping. I don't have other family members. And I say, if family is your only team, then it's going to be a really small team. So we all have to kind of build our team somehow beyond family, because even when you have, I had a sister who moved from Ohio out to Arizona several years after I did, to take care of my parents. And she and I were really quite a team. But I also had, you know, everyone from my mom's hairstylist who would come and get both my parents and take them to the salon, and he would talk with Daddy, and he had known Daddy for 30 years. And so the changes with the Alzheimer's didn't matter to him. You know, he knew, he just intuitively seemed to know how to talk with Dad. And that was a little break for me. Even when I was out of town, they would go get my parents, you know, that was even transportation. You know, I had a massage therapist who came to the house to work with Daddy, and who was a key part of our team, along with, you know, paid caregivers and the Area Agency on Aging and everyone else. How did you all build your teams? So Diane, you touched on this. Talk a little bit more about who was on your team.
Most of the caretaking was shared between myself and a middle sister. Truthfully, some family members were in denial about what was happening to our parents. So we shouldered the burden and carried on. I did a lot of the research in terms of finding out who to contact to try to get some support services in there. And I did took them to and from doctor visits and just tried to keep them as healthy as possible. But it was very challenging and time consuming and horribly frustrating because my parents were fiercely independent and did not like to accept help.
Yeah, that's a hard thing. That's a whole nother topic right there, isn't it? You know, getting people to accept assistance. Did you have any paid caregivers who were part of your team?
We couldn't afford that. We just couldn't. So my sister and I did what we could and checked as often as we could to make sure that everything was okay.
And am I remembering correctly that you your dad went to Adult Day Services Center?
We did.
Yeah, so that's a good example. They were part of your team. It was more affordable than an all day paying a one-on-one caregiver all day. And I know Peggy, you said that your mother-in-law also went to Adult Day Care Center.
Yeah. Yep. It was great.
And another example of an important part of your team. And you know, we did have some paid caregivers. My parents had long-term care insurance. They had veterans benefits, and it was still just exorbitantly expensive. And I ended up in financial devastation because of it. But all of those people playing different roles really helped. I know, Robin, you talked about the fact that it was mostly you and your son, but that you found the center that you went to who was so helpful with diagnosis, and they were part of your team.
Yeah, and we were fortunate towards the end. When you talk about denial, Diane, I agree. We had a yours, mine, ours family dynamic, and 2 of his 3 older children thought I was lying about what was wrong with their dad, because he could fake it. Like if you only talked to him for 10 or 15 minutes and you bumped into him, or you stopped by, he had this canned speech that he would give folks. So if you didn't spend enough time with him, he could, fake you out. You didn't know it. Luckily, his one son was very helpful with us. We had a neighbor who was helpful. His friend who he went to school with is pastor, very, very helpful. He started to organize his classmates at the sort of towards the end, probably the last few months of his life, because they would talk about everything they did when they were young. And it was very comforting to him. And I was fortunate to have a friend of his. My husband was a football coach. This is somebody he coached with. He was unemployed at the time. So he came here like 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, so I could work. And on the weekend that I could at least go to the store or whatnot. And even with that, it wasn't enough. It just wasn't. Hospice came in, but that nurse is in and out 15 minutes, like a couple times a week. You're like, whoop-de-doo, what's this doing for me? The aides were helpful because they did at least bathe him. But, once you get to that level of care that you're on hospice, 1 bath a day is not nearly enough for what you're doing.
That's so interesting you say that. When my dad was on hospice the last 4 months of his life, and because of the intense level of caring for him, they did send a home health aide, but it was a second person. We needed 2 people by that time to get him bathed and get him out of bed and get him dressed. And whenever he was walking, we had 2 people. So it was still help, but it wasn't, a panacea for us either. But on the other hand, the social worker was really helpful to me at that time because I was getting so emotionally, drained by that point. And so every little bit kind of helps different things for different people. I even had a concierge who I could pay $12 an hour, and she would do things like put out holiday decorations for me.
Mm-hmm.
As caregivers, we have to figure out how to live life while we're doing this, because you can't put life on hold. That's just physically impossible, right? So, the thing I learned was I can do anything, but I can't do everything. And, I think, would you all say you did things as caregivers that you never thought you would do?
Absolutely.
Peggy, what are some of the things you did as a caregiver that you never thought you'd do?
Just imagine.
Yeah, I mean,
It's-
it's taking care of every personal need and every, you know, and at the end, feeding my dad meals. You know, the whole bathroom thing is just a whole nother experience for most of us, and those are tough. You know, there's, you know,
Hello,
taking care of
please
them
leave a message after the tone.
It's interesting. Like my mother-in-law actually kind of regressed, and she was very attached to dolls, baby dolls. It was you know, you would catch her, she would change baby doll clothes, you know, and that was part of her when she was in the facility, and that's what they had on the floor. They actually had dolls, and I think they just get to the point where they regress back to wanting to, like, I think they behave as if they're actually they're kind of their children.
You know,
So-
it's interesting because, again, everybody experiences differently. My dad was not like that at all, but my grandmother was.
Yeah.
My dad had a service dog who was a huge part of our team. Did any of you have animals that played a part in your teams?
Oh, please. We used to come home when she was in the daycare program, and like we didn't get home till 4 and 5 in the afternoon. So if she was maybe home for an hour, we would come home and she'd be sitting on the sofa. We had 2 dogs. One will be on either side of her, sitting on the sofa watching TV with her. You know, they were like our caregivers for the last hour of the day.
Yes.
Definitely. We had 3 dogs in our home, and my husband was attached to Beanie. Beanie was his dog. I was never Beanie's person. This dog would lay in the hospital bed with him. When my husband was still up moving around, I always knew where he was because the dog was sitting outside a door. Like, okay, he's in the bathroom because the dog is sitting there. So Beanie definitely was his assistance animal. Beanie was an older dog, and my prayer was always, please, Lord, let Beanie live 5 minutes longer than he does, because I do not know what will happen if something happens to this dog. And sadly, about 6 months after my husband passed away, we did have to put the dog down. He got skin cancer. But the saddest thing the dog would do was, my husband was cremated and he would go lay by his urn and cry.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that breaks my heart. My dad's dog died about a year before he did, and my dad had a major downturn after Mr. Jackson passed on, because yeah, it's that connection. It's that that it's some kind of an unspoken connection there, and the intuitiveness that animals sometimes have. Somebody started to say something. Was it you, Peggy?
Yeah, Amy. So one of the things I know, back to, I think when Diane was talking about just getting difficulty getting help and that kind of thing. Because I know, so we kind of transitioned, because Carmen, when Serena's mom came to us, she was broke, right? So, you know, getting from Medicare to Medigap to Medicaid, I mean, we were broke. I mean, she was broke. I know one of the biggest things that it took her a few years to actually try to she had to get the right person to kind of help us through this thing. And I don't know what the person is actually called, but it's really critical to find that right person that can, within the system, that can help you get you through those different processes and paperwork. I think it's a social worker, or, you know, that person that can actually assist you to get through the actual right paperwork. Because I know, yeah, actually, when we got Carmen, she was living in Connecticut. She came to live with us. You know, she had an attachment to her Social Security. And we had to get through all of that and, you know, get the lien off of that in order to even get through any of the process. So it's really, really critical to get that right person within the system that can help you get through, to get her into that daycare program, to get her, you know. So I am hoping that gets covered later in the day with all these other groups. But, you know, if we can just make sure people get hooked up with the right people.
Yeah, that navigation of the systems is probably one of the most difficult challenges, you know, and that's where the area agencies can be a huge help, because they either they have someone who can help you, or they can refer you to someone who can. I know my dad was a veteran, and did any of you care for veterans? I don't know if Diane, your dad was perhaps, but the VA system was completely a mystery to me. You know, I'd never dealt with it. My dad was not a career military. He got out of the war after World War II in Korea, but there were wonderful benefits for him, and life, you know, really life-changing benefits like home-based primary care that he eventually got. But I had to connect, as you say, with the right person, help me figure out how to get him enrolled and get past the different hurdles. The VA has a caregiving support program at caregiver.va.gov that people can go to. And again, the Area Agency on Aging. There are also Medicaid planners, people who help you figure out the Medicaid stuff. I think, did any of you deal with Medicaid?
We did not. It was a situation where, you know, usually you consider yourself fortunate to have private insurance. For us, that was not a great thing when it came to caring for my husband. My birthday was first in the year, so we always had to use my insurance. We just didn't even take Medicare for him because we were paying the price for it, but we could never use it because they would use my insurance and mine would pay, and then you're done. So there were absolutely no benefits until you get to hospice, which then is 100% covered. But other than that, I think I could have gotten 2 skilled nursing visits a year that my insurance would have covered. And again, you know, you're on the like, whoop-de-doo, what's this doing? Like, it would cause more headache for me to bring you into the house and deal with what was going to go on for the little bit that you were going to do for me. The effects of having a stranger in the house would have been far worse than any benefit, because I would have had to be explaining the who, what, when, where, how, because he definitely had a fellow syndrome. So he always thought that I was doing any horrible thing you can do as a human being to him. So yeah, so it wouldn't have been worth it whatsoever. So lack of consistency, I think, is a problem with care.
That's such a good point. You know, I worked for full-time as well, and we did have paid caregivers. So I tended to have live-in caregivers so that we had consistency. But in the few times we used agencies, sometimes, you know, they'd send a different person each time. How did you all deal with that, you know, consistency? I know, Diane, you said that you didn't really have other paid caregivers. And so the consistency your dad had was you, your mom, you know, who else was part of that team?
I think she had to drop, Amy.
Oh, she did. Okay, sorry. Well, Peggy, you were saying, you know, that you did have some, you had the adult daycare center, you had you and your wife, and you know, how did you make sure that your mother-in-law had that consistency?
Well, it was just, honestly, it was just the 2 of us. We didn't have anybody else at that point. It was just the 2 of us until we got to the point that we had to actually put her into a facility. So actually, I take that back. We did have, at the very end, before we put her into a facility, we did have someone coming in. So she was doing the daycare, and then we had someone coming in afterwards. But that didn't go well. She thought that she just thought she was someone that was there, and it wasn't the same person every time, and it didn't go well, and it didn't last long. So
I agree wholeheartedly. They could never give me a set time or person who was coming to my house. So, you know, what am I supposed to let him sit and not try to clean him up? But, oh, this person comes at 8 in the morning. Okay, great. They're going to get him up, get him cleaned, whatever. Well, the next person comes the next day at 3 in the afternoon, but I don't know this because they don't communicate a schedule at all to you. So, you know, there would be times that I would have just cleaned him up, or whoever, you know, his friend that was helping would have cleaned him up. And then the aide comes in. Okay, well, I couldn't leave him like this all day. You know, I need to know what you are going to do. And they just don't operate like that. You are at their mercy. And that was, and you know what, we had UPMC hospice, and everything else I ever dealt with UPMC was absolutely phenomenal, except this hospice. I wouldn't let them care for my dog.
Well, you know, that's one of the things that we were talking about before, that, you know, things vary. I had a great experience with hospice. It did take a lot of advocating on my part to get a regular schedule. But once we did, and you know, and just keep stressing, we need the same person to come, because every time I have to train them otherwise, and, you know, that kind of thing. But you know, I think it, you know, these things do definitely vary. Peggy, you started to say something?
No. I guess, are there any questions, or there's?
Well, we've got a few topics here, and we'll come back to questions at the end. One of the things I wanted to talk about was the financial impacts. You know, caregiving can be a significant financial strain for people. As I mentioned, it had a devastating effect on my finances, because I was caring for 3 people over 3 years, over long distance and back and forth and all of that. But family caregivers spend on average about 26% of their income. And right now it's an average of about $7,000 a year. What kind of financial impacts has this had on you? You know, and I think closely tied in with this is work, because many caregivers don't work because they are providing that care, or they make changes to their work. So tell us, Peggy, about how the finances affected you and your work experience as well.
Well, I'm going to tell you that it didn't per se impact myself, but Serena had to make a career change in order to accommodate this. So she was a general manager running restaurants. She was running Olive Gardens, and she had to quit that job and take a job locally to be available for her mom. So she took a significant pay cut to be able to be available if anything occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So she probably took a $50,000 pay cut.
Wow.
To be local, to be able to be in the area if anything happened.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that right there, that's a huge impact both on current life and future retirement as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, life-changing.
Life-changing, exactly. How about you, Robin? Did you work at all while you were caring for your husband?
Absolutely. I worked full time because I was carrying the insurance. I still had dependent kids. So it was me, you know, if I didn't work, it was not just affecting me, it was my entire family. So, you know, I had a young son at home, I had a son in college. So, you know, their healthcare was contingent upon me working. I ended up working from home pre-pandemic, simply because I took a promotion and they didn't have office space for me. So my company is actually in New Jersey, but I work here in the Pittsburgh area, and I'm able to work at home. So, you know, that was a big help because I was here during the day. And, you know, he sort of knew until closer to the end that like work time was off limit time. I mean, that doesn't mean he would sneak around my door. Who were you talking to? Why were you laughing? Why were you, you know, all of that went on, but he would at least stay outside the door. You know, it was like we had this invisible barrier, like, do not cross. I have to do this. So, you know, it did not impact me that way financially. And actually, I was fortunate that right after he passed, I did get another promotion. I don't know how I did, because I think I spent like the last couple months just staring into the abyss, but it made me realize that I was expected to do that. Nobody worried about my career. Was I going to get promoted? Whatever. If I had been a man, it would have been like, oh my God, he can't do that. This is going to affect his job. What about his career? Oh, he might not get a raise. So, you know, the female caregiver perspective is like totally different, because it was just like, you're supposed to, you said until death do you part, and get to it. And there was no other question that that's what I was supposed to do.
Oh, that's such an interesting aspect to bring in. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think there is this expectation that we as family just step in and do these things, and especially, as you say, as women, sometimes as spouses, as children, there are assumptions about these roles, and that, well, we'll just put everything else aside, and it can really have devastating effects. You know, Peggy, you talked about, is it Serena? Your wife is Serena? You
Yes.
talked about the fact that she had to take that big change. I imagine that the two of you spent a lot of your own money to care for your mother-in-law. Like she lived with you, so you were providing housing. You probably
Yep.
bought the food. You know, what were
Yep.
some of the expenses that you ended up paying for?
I mean, just everything day to day, you know, medical, everything until, you know, we actually, you know, once we were able to figure out how to get her into a facility, we had to basically, you know, buy everything that she needed for that facility. We had to buy beds, we had to buy dressers, everything. I mean, day to day, everything.
Yeah. I did
So,
the same thing. You know, AARP has endorsed, there's a bipartisan Credit for Caring Act that's in Congress right now that would provide up to $5,000 federal non-refundable federal tax credit that would help working caregivers. And that amount of money as a tax credit for me would have made a huge difference. And you know, would that have made a difference for you all?
Yes.
sure.
Yeah. So, well, I urge you to contact your members of Congress about that because they need to hear from us as caregivers that this is, I really think I hear this so frequently that people don't understand that Medicare doesn't pay for everything. They don't pay for all of the care. And I just was heard from a caregiver the other day in our Facebook group saying, you know, this doctor or somebody said to me, just, you know, it was her employer said, you know, Medicare will pay for the home care. You need to come back to work. And she's like, no, it won't, you know. So those fallacies about the financial and the work impacts, I think, are so big. Let's go back to one of the things that you've both brought up, and that's the difficult behaviors. You know, caring for someone, I've cared for, my mom had a stroke and my sister had Cushing disease and various things, but caring for someone who has some form of dementia is a whole different ballgame. I think it's caregiving on steroids. And part of that is because of the behaviors that can be so difficult. Whether it's sundowning or, you know, my dad would be, he couldn't be alone for 5 minutes, kind of like your husband, Robin, you talked about, like, what am I supposed to be doing? Where am I supposed to be going? You know, he was not negative, but he just had to have that constant reassurance. What are some of the things that you did that helped? So Robin, you go first. You know, you talked about you somehow managed to have that boundary with your door while you were working. What are some of the other coping things that you came up with that would help other caregivers as they're dealing with difficult behaviors?
Music was big. I could, you know, put music on. I got him, you know, he had a tablet. It was loaded with all the songs he liked. He had a playlist. That would occupy him for a good amount of time. TV, he was always a huge TV fan, and he would just sit and stare at it for hours and hours and hours. But, you know, on the flip side, you have to learn coping mechanisms too. So because I couldn't leave the house, but I wanted to occupy my mind, I started making wreaths and crafts and all of this type of thing, which I hate crafts, but it was something that I could do and not be able to leave the house. So it definitely was a coping mechanism for me, because since he's passed, I have not made one goddamn thing and have no desire to, but I could be physically near him because he had to see me. But I could be at least using my mind in some way to create or do something. And that helped. And then he liked it because it would be like, oh, will you make this for my friend this? Or would you make that for my friend or my uncle?
Mm-hmm.
So he thought I was doing it for him, which, you know, was all better.
You involved him in the process. That's a good one. And you bring up music. I mentioned I have a degree in music therapy. So music was our constant companion all day long. My dad, you know, even getting him to exercise. If I played military march music, because he had been in World War II and the Korean War, he would get up there and march and walk and exercise. When he would start to get anxious and, you know, angry, and I would just start singing and he would join in. And watching the movie musicals were when he couldn't follow the plot on other TV shows anymore, the movie musicals were pretty easy to follow and he enjoyed the music. What about you, Peggy? What are some of the coping things that you came up with?
I'm going to tell you, I don't remember sitting around very much. I think we just got up and got out of the house and went shopping, went to the grocery store. I mean, I think we just kept ourselves busy. We just got up and got out, if not to go eat dinner, but to, go see friends, but we just kept her busy. She was one of those people, like I saw a question out there. She was a walker, like one of the, so one of our, we used to come home and we'd find a shopping cart in the front stoop. So she would get up. We lived close enough to a shopping center where she would walk out. She would walk and go shopping and come back and with the shopping cart. And, we'd have to throw it back in the car and take it back to the shopping center. But it got concerning. And that's, at some point, we knew, that's when we kind of knew that when we got afraid, we knew that's when we had to put her in a facility, that we knew that she was at risk of hurting herself. And when we couldn't be there, and when, that her life was in danger, that's kind of when we knew that we couldn't be there. We couldn't afford to both be there. We couldn't afford, to have someone there with her that could keep her safe. That's when we kind of knew that we had to get her into a facility. So, but we, but that was our mechanism of, we weren't sitting at home. We were always keeping busy. That was her mode of operation, was just stay busy, stay,
Yeah.
We had a few incidents. So, I have two kids from our previous relationship, and we had taken, I had, the kids were young, and we had gone and spent the day with them, and we were on our way back from New Jersey. And on our way back, she freaked out on us, thinking we were kidnapping her. And she's like, she saw a police car, and she's like, stop, I want to talk to the policeman. And we're like, what? She got really, really agitated on us, and we're like, what's going on? So we didn't realize that she thought we were kidnapping her. And by the time we got home and she saw where we were, she calmed down. But she got into this, like, we had just been out too long. It had been too long a day for her. It had gotten dark, and by the time we got home, she had just gotten really agitated through the whole day. So.
And she was exhausted. Yeah, I think that's always helpful to figure out what the need is, what's going on. When my dad had to go to the bathroom and he couldn't say it, or he was hungry, you talked about Robin, your husband, just needing to see you. He just needed that connection to see you all the time. Trying to figure out what's going on with them is always such a challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned going out, and that was something. I still had this teenage son in my house, and he played sports. So we would take him to sporting events. My husband loves sports. One thing that, while it was hard to get him there physically, and you went through all of this, when he would come home, he would be so wiped out that he would actually sleep, which is opposite of what he would normally do with the Lewy body. He'd be up all night, because I think he put every fiber of his body into trying to hold it together.
Yeah.
Not to embarrass his son, not to, just not to let people know he was sick, whatever. So he would come home and sleep, and you would be like, thank you, because he'd be exhausted from putting on this show, basically.
Interesting. I did something with my dad that not many people have done, in that we started getting acupuncture. And after my mom died, my dad took a big downturn because she was his North Star. And I started getting acupuncture to help me with the grief. And I asked if she would work with my dad. And she started with magnets, and then later small needles. And eventually he would have needles all around him, and he would just slip there in the recliner and sleep. But over time, that really helped a lot with his anxieties. So we would see a little cognitive boost, and he would be much calmer. And she worked with traditional Chinese medicine with him too. And so I just always throw that out there because, again, that might not work for some people at all. I mean,
Right.
think of putting needles in a person with dementia, but it helped my dad. So sometimes you just have to try things.
Something I would tell folks to advocate to get early on is it's called Abhr Gel. And it's a mixture, it's a compound of several different drugs. But the good part about it was when he was highly agitated, I could get just close enough to him to wipe this gel on him, and it would bring him down to the point then we'd be able to medicate him afterwards. Because, you know, the hospice folks had told me when he is in that mode, do not get close to him because he will hurt you.
That's a really good point. You know, I've never heard of that one. Thank you for sharing that. That's something people can look into. And I think, you know, that's the hard thing is when that level of anxiety is reached, you know, how do you get it down? We had tea from the traditional Chinese doctor. And once Dad had a little bit of that tea, he could calm down, or the music, you know. Peggy, anything else did your mother-in-law ever get that kind of behavior?
The agitation.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point about taking your husband out. So it's a very common behavior that they work so hard all day to present themselves as being together that by the end of the day, they're so exhausted that's that whole concept of that sundowners, and they work so hard to appear and present themselves that they're exhausted. And that's why the behavior at night becomes so hard and down, and agitated. I don't. My mother-in-law, she actually got a little nicer. I think the more into it she got, because she wasn't necessarily the nicest person in the beginning. She was a little more agitated in the beginning.
The experience.
You know, everybody's different. Everybody's personality is different. It's honestly, there's no two people that are the same. And honestly, you know, it all depends on the person. You know, I see my neighbor here, you know, the one thing I'll say is don't let people become sedentary. It's not good for a good person. It's worse for a, you know, somebody who's got Alzheimer's. If you can keep them moving, keep them healthy, you know, other ways, because sedentary is not good for anybody.
My dad used to walk the dog 3 or 4 times a day. And that was one of the good things for having the dog, that it gave him a purpose to do that and get out and keep moving. I totally agree with you. But then that's easier for some people than others, of course. Right. You know, and what about sundowning? You talked about when you took your mother-in-law on that trip, and it started getting dark and all of those things. You know, one of the biggest topics that we talk about is sundowner syndrome and the things that happen. And what are some of the coping mechanisms? We've talked about music. What about lighting? Did you all do anything creative with lighting?
No, we probably tried every medication in the world to try to make him sleep.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that the Chinese doctor suggested was give him a foot soaking early in the afternoon, and we started doing that maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it tended to calm him so much that then that sundowning time he got through that better. And that was for a period of time, maybe, you know, I don't know how many months that worked, and then that didn't work anymore. And then we tried something else, you know, and so sometimes with the sundowning, you have to just keep trying different things, right?
He had some of that, but one of the things that actually started us recognizing his illness with the Lewy bodies, he had the Rem Sleep Disruption, so he would fight all night long. So you had to, whatever he was dreaming, it was always violent, and he was fighting. So you had to, you know, at a certain point in time, I just no longer stayed in the room, which didn't play well with his whole Othello syndrome, because I was already having affairs and giving away his money. And then I wasn't staying in the room, but I'm like, I'm trying to sleep. And because if he would get a hold of you, you really would have to fight to get away from him. And he's not awake. You are, he's not. And you know, have to fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I want to talk one more thing about the safety and technology issue, and then we have some questions I think we can get to. We save time at the end, so please keep posting your questions, and we'll get to them. You talked about putting a phone in your mother-in-law's purse, Peggy, and I don't know how long ago that was, and there are different things available now. But how else did you use technology and things to keep her safe?
Back then, so we're talking 2006, 2007.
So there wasn't as much available as there is now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the only thing we could really think of. She always, she was old school, so she always carried her pocketbook. So no matter where she went. So we just took a old flip phone and buried it at the bottom of her pocketbook. We always made sure it was charged. She didn't even know it was there, but it just had that, GPS in it. And our neighbor thought he was being really nice one day. He found her walking and he said, "Hey, you need a ride?" And she liked to shop. He picked her up and he took her off to this shopping center, this high-end shopping center, which we know where it was. And he dropped her off and she didn't know where she was. And then she had to walk home, and and one of our friends called us and said, "Hey, I saw your mom on Main Street." We're like, "Main Street? What is she doing all the way over there?" And then we're, looking at the phone, trying to find her to go pick her up. So it did come in handy to be able to, we could find her, but within a couple blocks of, wherever she was.
Yeah.
We didn't have to use it very often. Only a couple times, but at least gave us some sort of location. I'm trying to think of, other than that, I can't think of any kind of real technology, that we ever tried to use, but.
One of the simple things that I used was an audio monitor, like a baby monitor, where I would have that in my parents' room and dad's room after mom passed, and so I could hear if he was starting to get out of bed. And then I got a video camera, so I could actually see if he was just turning over or getting out of bed. I had a floor mat alarm, so eventually, once the minute his feet hit the ground, an alarm went off, so I could get there right away. And I had a motion activated alarm in the hallway. So those, little by little, I kept adding things like that. What about you, Robin? Did you use technology at all?
No, not really. He was not a wanderer, so that wasn't really an issue. More so with him, it was fall risk, and that just got progressively worse. So, we had every walker, cane, scooter, anything, any apparatus we could try to get him to use to be stable. So not necessarily technology, but that was the biggest problem with him, was falling.
I do take that back. We did have a front door. We did put things on the doors.
Yeah.
So we knew if she went in or out.
And those are so inexpensive now. You can get them at the hardware store, right, and it make all the difference. I remember I was staying in a hotel once, and I found a man wandering in his pajamas out in the lobby, and I helped just because of my experience, and took him to the front desk, and they eventually found his son, who he had just gotten up out of the room and walked out. And I told the son, like, you can get this floor mat alarm or just these little magnetized door chime things. Right. And those things are so much more readily available now than they used to be. So I encourage you all to kind of think about the technology and the easy things that you can do. I do believe we have some questions. I don't know, Teresa, do you want to moderate the questions? You want me to look at the chat and talk about those?
Sure, Amy, you could certainly, as I'm talking, look at the Q&A. And I have to thank folks who put questions and also little pieces of advice into the question and answer for folks to take a look at. By and large, the questions that were posed have been answered as we went along. Some of them were real specific in looking at an adult daycare list or where to go for some financial assistance. And one question that's outstanding, Peggy, you already did hit on it, but I didn't know if there was anything more you wanted to add about how you and your wife decided or knew when placement was needed with your mother-in-law. Anything else you wanted to add in there? I think you did an awesome job answering it, but since it was a direct question, wanted to see if you wanted to add anything else or And that would be all the questions that are right now in our Q&A. So keep them coming.
Yeah, I mean, it really just came down to safety. It really, like, she was a roamer. She used to like to just, and it was okay. Like, so we lived in a community where she could just walk the paths and everything. And she liked to go shopping. But it really got to the point that it became unsafe. And when we got to the point that we felt that, she was making choices that were not good. And we were also waiting. So she was on Medicaid, and we were, when they called us and said that we could get a bed, it was a combination of things, that was when we chose. So it was a combination of things, because when you're on Medicaid and they tell you that there's an availability, you kind of have to jump on it, or you're going to wait for some other time. So it was a combination of factors. So we knew she was ready. And the other thing is, when we did have to put her into the facility, they basically, you put her in and you cannot see the person for at least 2 weeks. They tell you it's for, I think mostly probably for you, but for them, so that they can adapt to the facility and get used to being there. And then, you can be in touch with the facility, but you cannot see them for the first 2 weeks.
Yeah. And that's not going to necessarily be true for every facility, but that does happen quite a bit to help people get used to being apart. And I always tell families, you need to decide if that's how you want to do it.
Right.
Because some, I know with my dad, when my parents did move to a senior community for a little bit, but they were in like an independent living apartment. And my dad needed me there every day for that security, to help him figure out where the light switches were and where all this stuff was. But that's a little different than being in a skilled nursing facility or in a memory care unit.
Yeah. She was in a memory care. She was in a memory care unit. And it was mostly because it was mostly, put it this way, she was not completely, did not remember everything. She was still attached. And we basically had to make it as if it was her apartment. So we had to make her feel like she was comfortable there, that it was still her place. But, I don't know. It was a very uncomfortable situation for everybody, put it that way.
Yeah. The transitions are really difficult. And I think all the transitions in care are really hard. And the things that you go back to your basics, you go back to what are the coping skills that work? How does music help? How does, familiar surroundings, the animals, the baby doll, the robotic cats and dogs that now I know a lot of people are hearing from caregivers they're getting for their loved ones who just absolutely bond with these little, they're stuffed animals, but they're like robotic and they'll make sounds and things. So there's all kinds of comfort things that you can bring into play.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is decision making is related to safety and availability. I mean, I think those are the two things that
and
will help.
Also when you're ready, right? Also when you as caregivers realize I can't do this anymore. And sometimes, you reach those points and you get more help or you get different help and you continue in your caregiving at home. But sometimes you as caregivers have a health crisis, or you see the effects affecting family, or, there are different ways where everyone has a different point.
Yeah. One thing I would tell folks when you're in that caregiving situation is, don't forget you're still a human being. People make you out to be this martyr, like you're doing all this wonderful stuff and, oh, you're taking care of somebody, but you are still a person. So when those attacks come at you, you do have feelings. And I tell folks, some days I was good at it and some days I yelled back, and that's okay. You have to still understand that, you're going to have emotions, and it's very difficult to just completely remove yourself from the situation. Yes, they're sick. Doesn't mean you have to like it.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And just as we come to the end of our session, I want to talk about three quick things. One, how did you take care of yourself during this experience? And what tips do you have for others on doing so? And what joys did you experience? What, we talk a lot about the challenges. I know for me, just, I did have a lot of fun. Peggy, you talked about that, going out, having fun. What were the joys you experienced as part of your caregiving experience? And how did you take care of yourself?
I'll go. I did not take good care of myself because it was his care, raising a child, and then there were not any hours left in the day for me. So no, I did not. I just didn't have any time left to worry about anything I needed to do. Only things that were helpful for me at that time, pre-pandemic, is about once a quarter, I would travel for work. So everybody would rally to come stay, or do whatever so I could go to work. So it would be like, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I went away for work, but it was still work, but it was like a vacation compared to what you were living with. So, that helped. But then the pandemic hit and I didn't get those little breaks, and then it was really bad. That's probably when I started crafting to not, lose.
You can do that for yourself. That's a good point.
Yeah, I guess I did that. And the joys, I have to tell you, I did not have any joys in taking care of my husband because of the way his personality was. My joy through this whole situation is the bond that I have to my baby son, and the fact that, we're almost like one person. We can finish each other's sentences. And so I guess the other good part is that joy of that bond with him. And he also looks just like his dad. So I still have a man who kind of looks familiar, who I love and loves me.
Yeah. The love endured through the experience. What about you, Peggy? How did you and your wife take care of yourselves in this situation, and what joys did you experience?
Oh, I have to tell you, it was hard. There wasn't a lot of vacationing. We really didn't have, there wasn't a lot of going away. Let's put it that way. It was very hard to get people to come and stay. And I think the one time we did go away, the experience was not that great for the person staying here. Like I said, I mean, we really took her mom Carmen with us. We really took her, and we have a lot of pictures of a lot of smiling, good times with her, with us, with our friends. We took her to a lot of happy hours where she had a good time, singing, dancing, having a good time while we could. So I think we have a lot of good memories of those times before things got really bad.
It's definitely easier to do those things. I think of it as like my car can't run on empty, and I can't either. So I do things to fill myself up. And
Yep.
A lot of times it's just quick things like getting a cup of coffee or having fresh flowers in the house. But anytime you can do that and go to a happy hour, connect with friends,
yep,
kind of big fill up. So it sounds like you intuitively found ways to do that, both of you, within the limits of what you had. I mean, right.
It was funny at times because we would get there and she'd be like, "Are we ready to go home yet?" But she would stick around for, it would just shorten the visit, but it didn't last for a long time, but the little bit that it did, we had a good time. So, and you go back over pictures, and that's the best part. When she passed away, you go back over the pictures and there's just a lot of smiles, a lot of happy faces, and it was a good time. So,
yeah. Well, as we come to a close, I want to end with sharing some resources. I want to make sure everybody knows you can go to aarp.org/caregiving for our family caregiving site. Join me in the AARP Family Caregivers discussion group on Facebook. And I want to ask each of you to share, what are some of the resources that helped you the most through your caregiving experiences? And if you have any final tips or advice you want to share. Diane, or I'm sorry, Robin, you want to go first?
Yeah, for me, it was definitely the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at the University of Pittsburgh. So we got the diagnosis, we got referred to Dr. Valerie Susky, who was absolutely amazing. She was a neurologist who just understood him. She would play games with him. I mean, I adored her. And he would be happy to go see her because I would say, oh, we're going to go see your girlfriend. And he was very happy about that. But she had the proper personality to deal with him. And I don't think I would have ever found her if it wasn't for that referral. So that was the thing that worked for me. I also am a researcher by nature. I do a lot of it for work as well. So at night when I couldn't sleep, I would just read and read and read. And I'm one of those prepare for the worst, hope for the best kind of folks. So you have to know your personality. And if you want a lot of information, get a lot of information. If you don't do what's right for you. I needed to know in detail what I was facing. But I know that doesn't work for everybody. And so you should definitely do you.
Yeah, that's actually the best advice of all, right? Do you, do what helps you get through it the most. What about you, Peggy?
Right, so recommendations. I would highly recommend the AA.org, reading the book, The 36-Hour Day. I would recommend finding a local AA support group and trying to get involved with other people going through the situation that you're going through, just to have those people to talk to.
And when
Things
you
I
say
would,
AA, you're meaning Alzheimer's Association.
yes, oh, yes, yeah, sorry, yeah,
Okay.
sorry. I don't know what the actual ALZ.org, sorry. I would recommend, and I think this is on the Alzheimer's thing, is looking into something called the Pulsed, POLST, and then a conservatorship versus a power of attorney. And one is, and the reason we had to look into this was because of the situation. As I mentioned, Carmen came to us and they had a lien against her. She was in debt when she came to us, and the conservatorship makes it so that you're not responsible for that person's debt. Whereas in power of attorney, you're responsible for that person's debt. Those are the things that, that we experienced. So just things to, take a look into from my perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, and absolutely getting an elder care attorney. All these things are different. They vary state to state. It's very complicated, but thank you both for sharing your personal experiences. It's not always easy to talk about this stuff. And I think, again, everybody has a unique experience caregiving. So hearing from as many different caregivers and different perspectives as possible is really the most helpful thing. So thank you both for all you did for your loved ones, for all you're doing now and sharing your stories. And thank you to all of you out there watching who are caring for someone who's living with dementia right now. We hear you, we see you, we're behind you, and there's support for you. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Happy holidays.
And
All righty, guys. Thank you, everybody.
And I'm going to pass this back to you, Teresa.
You're muted, Teresa.
I am muted. There's one in every group. It's me today. Thank you, Amy, Robin, and everyone who participated, Peggy, everyone who participated, and Sarah, I will kick it back over to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. And thank you so much to Robin, to Diane and Peggy. I know Diane had something come up, but really, Amy, on behalf of the Alzheimer's Association, P4A, and of course the AARP, we're really grateful for your facilitation this morning. So thank you. Without further ado, we're going to go straight into our next presentation. I'm going to ask Melissa Chambers to get on the screen here. Hello, Melissa. Welcome. We're going to get right into the next topic of understanding dementia-related behaviors. And I'm beyond excited to have one of our amazing Alzheimer's Association train community educators to do this presentation. Melissa Chambers is the owner of Melissa Chambers Consulting. She began providing her services in January of 2020, so right there in the smack dab in the middle of COVID, after working in the healthcare field for over 25 years. She has a very successful career in the senior living industry of over 14 years, including hospice and senior living, specifically assisted living and memory care, which is where her passion for dementia care lies. Melissa is a certified dementia practitioner and a certified Alzheimer's disease and dementia care trainer through the National Council of Dementia Practitioners. She is committed to being a resource to the community, as well as ensuring excellent customer service and care to all that she serves. So Melissa, without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to you. And I will say too, for housekeeping, we did notice a few Q&A portions in there that's very specific to resources. And I want to give a commercial for 12:45. We will be having a very robust provider panel that is really probably going to tackle some of the questions that we have in the queue as well. So wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm so happy to be a part of this. And I caught the end of this last conversation with Amy, Peggy, and Robin. And what a wonderful conversation. And just thank you so much for sharing. Again, I know how hard that can be, but it's so helpful for people to hear. And I think the big takeaway for me was, something I already know, but it's always good to remember everyone is different. And, everyone is going through different situations, and their help can be different, and their person that they're caring for that's living with the disease can be different. And so what a great takeaway. So I am going to get my screen situated so that you can see it here. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right, are we good? Can we see the PowerPoint?
We can, it's just not in full screen mode, that's all.
Okay. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so as Sarah said, we are going to be talking today about understanding and responding to dementia-related behavior. So thank you again for having me. I greatly appreciate it. So by the end of the program today, we're going to be reviewing the challenging behavioral aspects of Alzheimer's disease, different strategies to help address them. And by the end of the program, we will be able to identify the common triggers for behaviors associated with dementia, explain the process for assessing and identifying challenging behaviors, and list strategies to address common dementia-related behaviors. Now, before we begin, I just want to touch base on this. I always like to do this sort of at the beginning so everyone is on the same page. We know that dementia is a general term. It is a word to describe a group of symptoms, typically including memory loss, some memory decline. And Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia. It is the most commonly diagnosed form of dementia. Usually anywhere between 50 to 80% of all dementia is diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And vascular dementia, frontotemporal lobe dementia, Lewy body, sometimes Parkinson's can be related with dementia. Sometimes it doesn't have to be. So there are many, many, many different forms of dementia. I think the count is now actually up to 120 different types of dementia diagnoses. Some of them are actually reversible. Most are irreversible. And today we are concentrating mostly on Alzheimer's disease. So one thing that I like to mention, well, we know that Alzheimer's causes, changing. We notice most of the time the short-term memory, a lot of their behavior, sometimes personality, changes in their thinking and things like that. One of the most important things I want to mention is that Alzheimer's disease or any form of dementia is not a normal part of aging. Now, back in the day, we used to think that, we used to think that as we aged, we were going to become senile. We all remember that word senile. Everybody talked about it. It just seemed like everybody that was older became senile, and older then was, maybe 60, 70, maybe 80. And we just kind of thought that. A lot of times people would say, oh, they're crazy. She's crazy. She's 72 and she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Don't even talk to her, and that's just kind of how it was thought about then. And so we now know much, much better, thankfully. So, there are some things that we do, like go to the store and shop and then walk out and forget where we parked. Those are normal signs of aging. That doesn't mean that we have dementia, but any signs or symptoms of dementia is not normal. So just something that I wanted to talk about. And then what we mentioned at the beginning, or what I mentioned at the beginning from the last presentation, everyone is different. And the symptoms can all vary between people. So just because you have a friend or a family member who went through this and your loved one isn't going through that same thing doesn't mean anything. Everyone is different. So parts of the brain are affected. Many parts of the brain, the hippocampus is one of the things that is first affected. The hippocampus we can think of as sort of like a filing cabinet. And, we have our memories. They're stored in the folder and they're put in the filing cabinet, which is the hippocampus, and they're stored there. And so when we need to recall them, we can. Well, when someone has Alzheimer's, their hippocampus is broken. It's not working correctly. And so they have trouble remembering those short-term things, like what did they have for breakfast this morning? Or did they even eat breakfast this morning? The frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe, all of this is affected eventually. So all behavior is a way of communication. We know that communication is affected. And so anytime there is a behavior, we know that it is our loved one or the person we're caring for trying to communicate something to us. So anxiety, agitation, someone might be restless or pacing or feeling very distressed, someone who is anxious or agitated. Maybe if they're confused or suspicious, they're not recognizing people, maybe they're not recognizing different places or things, maybe they're very accusatory. A lot of times we see that with the people that they are closest to. A lot of times we see just something simple as when they go in the bathroom and they look in the mirror, they're not recognizing that that's themselves. And so that can cause some confusion or suspicion. Aggression, aggression can be verbal or physical. There can be many forms of aggression, and it is very hard for caregivers to see that in their loved one and know really exactly what to do or how to deal with it. Wandering. I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about wandering because it is very, very serious. All of these behaviors are serious, but wandering is something that I don't think people realize so much about and how common it can be. So really anyone who has an Alzheimer's diagnosis who can get around, whether that's walking on their own with a cane, with a walker, even if they're in a wheelchair and they can maneuver it themselves, either with their legs or with their arms, anyone who can get around who has Alzheimer's disease is at risk for wandering. About 60% or 6 in 10 people with dementia will wander. So this is a very common thing. Mostly about 94% of people who wander are found within 1.5 miles from where they disappeared from, whether that's their home or a store or, you know, the assisted living or personal care that they're living or wherever it is that they disappeared from. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because wandering does make me very nervous. We're going to talk about what to do, an example of what to do. But repetition, hallucinations, delusions, sundowning, these are all really the most common types of behaviors. And your person living with Alzheimer's may have 1 or 2 of these, they may have all of these, or they may have none of them, you know, but this is just a general idea of some of the behaviors, and we're going to talk about, you know, what to do. So some of the most difficult changes for caregivers to understand can really kind of happen in the middle stage of the disease. So we have physical comfort. This could be some causes, you know, physical comfort. Maybe they're tired, maybe they're hungry, thirsty, maybe they're constipated, maybe they have a full bladder. Maybe they're cold or hot, you know, maybe the room temperature is uncomfortable to them. Behaviors could be triggered by overstimulation. Maybe they're sad, maybe they're feeling a loss, maybe they're bored or overstimulated. There could be some changes in their routines. Isolation is a big thing. Maybe their living situation has changed, which changes their familiar surroundings. Fear, difficult tasks. The causes are so many, and it could be really hard to determine. And it's helpful if we use these steps that we're going to talk about next. We almost have to be like an investigator or a detective, truly. So we're going to explore today how to understand and address these common dementia-related behaviors by using this 4-step process. Detect and connect, address physical needs first, then address emotional needs, and reassess and plan for the next time. So the first thing we're going to talk about, the first step, is to detect and connect. Now, we just said that behavior is a form of communication. The behavior isn't actually abnormal if we think about it. Can we get upset or mad? You know, all of these things, they're not abnormal things. It's just the reason behind it. So we have to meet them where they are. We have to join their world. They have a disease. We cannot make them understand us or be in our world. We have to go where they are. And we have to figure that out, and we have to try to accommodate and figure out what they're trying to communicate. We should connect with them while we're trying to assess the situation. You know, don't just come in and go straight to it. You know, talk to them, try to connect with them. Maybe try to tell a story, or, you know, for sure, introduce yourself, things like that. Try to connect with them as you are trying to assess the situation. And really, to understand the behavior, we have to sort of look for the triggers. Before we can intervene, we really have to do this. So think of things like who was there, who was present, what happened just before the behavior began, where did the behavior take place, when does it occur, how do we react? And we should be really approaching the person calmly and respectfully from the front, so we can have eye contact. We should have very friendly body language and watch our nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is very important. Again, we want to approach the person with respect, like we would want to be treated. And they respond a lot more. As I said, nonverbal communication is very important. So they respond more to our tone and our body language than what we're saying verbally. So we need to pay attention to that. Okay, so physical needs, pain, medical issues, signs of injury, maybe they fell, physical problems like hunger, thirst, lack of social interaction, environmental triggers or discomfort, clothing, lighting, room temperature, infections such as urinary tract infections, arthritis flare-ups, compression fractures, constipation. These are all some physical needs that we need to think about. You know, when we talk about constipation, you know, monitoring their bowel movements or almost journaling to keep track of it, because they aren't going to be able to tell us. And constipation really can cause a lot of distress and, you know, pain, and unnecessary, because if we're monitoring it and we see that they aren't having bowel movements, we can talk to the doctor about perhaps taking some sort of a medication to help with that, to help keep them regular. But really almost going back to, like, you know, when we had infants and they told us to journal everything that they ate and how many ounces and when they slept and when they peed and when they pooped and all of those kind of things, you know, so really kind of keeping track of that. Maybe they're on new medications or they're getting a reaction from a medication. You know, they may not be able to tell us about their symptoms. And so while we're assessing, we have to really continue to connect with them and make the adjustments as necessary. Again, we have to make those adjustments because we're the ones that can change. And then always make sure if there is any unusual changes in behaviors or they're having any symptoms, report it, check with the doctor. You know, that's always okay. That's always something that we can do. So addressing their emotional needs, really, we have to focus on the feelings and not the facts, right? So we have to think about, how does this situation feel to the person? We want to try to avoid correcting them. Work with their preferences to try to make the interventions. Redirect them to a more soothing activity or a more soothing environment. Again, we want to try to keep things calm. Reassure them, let them know that we're here, we're going to help them, and that they're safe. You know, again, we want to really focus on the feelings, identify the feeling behind the behavior, and then try to address that emotion. Be very reassuring, again, very important. So, you know, if they are feeling anxious and they're acting anxious or agitated, we don't want to focus on the agitation or the fact that they're anxious. Why are they feeling this way? And try to focus on that feeling of why they are feeling this way. And again, we don't always know, so we really have to try to investigate what's going on. And then really understanding and addressing the behavior so that we can plan for the next time, because right, there is going to be a next time. So what worked, what didn't, what went well, what did not? You know, no one is perfect. We have to always constantly be making adjustments. We're not ever going to do everything right all the time. And so for sure, you know, give yourself grace when you're doing this. What adjustments need to be made? You know, when we talk about what worked and what didn't, okay, now what adjustments do we have to make for the next time? Make a plan. It may never happen again, but it may happen again in an hour. So make a plan, think things out. How do we recognize the signs? You know, we talked earlier about what happened right before the behavior. So how do we recognize the signs? How quickly do we need to respond? What do we need to try? And in what order do we need to try these things? And what if the situation escalates? Do we have an effective plan? What do we know what to do? And who can help? Is there someone we can call or reach out to give assistance if something like this should happen? Whatever this is, you know, whatever it is that we're planning for. So just to give some examples about these 4 steps, we're going to take some of the more common behaviors, or just some behaviors that a lot of people have questions about. The first is anxiety or agitation. So when someone living with some sort of dementia is restless, pacing, maybe they're feeling distressed, really reliant on the caregiver. They could be anxious. Okay. So again, we want to start by looking for physical issues, then their emotional needs, see if something happened, see if something upset them. Did something trigger them? Or do they have hurt feelings? Are they angry? Are they worried? Are they sad? And focus on that feeling. And then finally, reassess and plan for the next time that maybe they are feeling anxious or agitated. Aggression is another one that a lot of people have really some trouble with. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this could be physical, this could be verbal, or this could be both. So first we want to detect and connect, listen, and try to understand the feeling. Try to understand what's happening and they're feeling. Identify those triggers. Remember the who, what, when, where, when, how. Apologize. If you feel like it would calm them down, apologize. It doesn't matter if it warrants an apology or not. It doesn't matter if it's your fault, or just, think about when you're in a situation and you're really mad. Doesn't it make you feel slightly better if they apologize? If someone doesn't apologize, we walk away and say they didn't apologize or anything. They didn't even acknowledge that. Apologies kind of help a lot just to kind of calm things down. So apologize, whether it has anything to do with you or not. Just, I'm really sorry that this is happening. I'm sorry that you're feeling this way. And just kind of that may calm things. Look for physical issues, then emotional needs. Sometimes people can act aggressively if they're feeling like danger is happening, or they're perceiving danger, or maybe they're feeling scared or alarmed about something or surprised about something. Okay. So, and then we want to reassess and plan for the next time. Okay. So back to wandering. I could talk about this a lot. Anyone, this is so important. Anyone who has dementia and can be mobile in some way, shape, or form can wander. And so oftentimes I hear families say, well, mom's in a wheelchair. I'm not worried about her wandering. She doesn't need to be in a secured memory care or secured memory neighborhood. She's in a wheelchair. Doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. I mean, I have seen people in wheelchairs, residents in wheelchairs, book it right out the door. Sometimes we don't know where they get this energy from or where they get this ability to be so fast when normally they're not, but I have seen it happen. So it does include people in wheelchairs. So we first want to detect and connect, identify the immediate triggers. Who, what, when, where, and how. Did they get scared? Did they get alarmed? Do they think something's happening? Again, we have to join them in their world, meet them where they are, and see if anything about the wandering is maybe goal directed. Do they feel like they need something? Look for physical issues, then look for their emotional needs. Are they bored? Are they understimulated, overstimulated? And finally, reassess and plan for the next time. Now, just to talk about this again for another minute, if you do have a loved one that wanders, there are a few things I want to just tell you. Start searching immediately. The immediate second that you know that someone, your loved one, has wandered. Start searching immediately, and don't search for any longer than 15 minutes without calling 911. It is super important. And when you call 911, let them know someone with dementia or Alzheimer's disease or whatever type of dementia that they have has wandered and you can't find them. Let them know that. And then just like we had sort of at the end of the conversation when Amy and Peggy and Robin were talking about technology, there are GPS devices, medic alert, things like that. So look into that. But for sure, don't look any longer than 15 minutes and call 911. And so many families, again, they think, well, it's summertime. I don't have to worry about it, because if they go outside, it's nice out, and what's going to happen? Well, everybody worries about the winter because they think their loved one can get lost and freeze to death. Well, what if they get lost and they have a heat stroke or something like that? So it does not matter what time of year. If you have someone that's wandering, it needs addressed. It's very, very important. Another, it seems like the one question that everybody has is, how do we know when this behavior is a problem? We're doing all these things. We're following the steps. We're detecting and connecting. We're looking for physical. We're looking for emotional. How do we know when this is a problem if we can't handle it? And there's one simple answer. One question we have to ask ourselves: are they causing harm to themselves or others? And that's really it. And, sometimes we have to look at that and really examine if they're causing harm. So I have a quick story, a quick example. I think I have time. I once had a resident, and he was in his mid-60s. He was a very tall gentleman who was in very good health. The only thing he had wrong with him was that he had an Alzheimer's disease diagnosis, and he was young. His wife could not take care of him anymore. They owned a farm, and he was a mechanic, and he was always trying to go outside, and then he would get lost, and she could not take care of him anymore. And she was totally distressed, as you can imagine, having to move him. And so his favorite color was red. And so she made sure that she got his apartment all ready for him. And she had red bedspread and red throw pillows and, little red picture frames. And she just was trying to make everything perfect. And so she said to me, I'm really nervous about him coming here because, our whole lives, it has always kind of been his way or the highway, whatever he wanted to do, I just always gave in to him. And it was like, okay, and she said, sometimes he yells, not in a mean way, just like he raises his voice. That's just his nature. And she said, I'm just worried that if the aides want him to do something and, it's not like his idea, or he doesn't want to, if he yells at them, they're going to get afraid, or, whatever. And she said, he would never do anything. He's never been violent or anything, but she always worried about that. So moving forward, lo and behold, he did raise his voice and stuff. And because he was so tall and, very limber, the aides did get somewhat nervous. But for whatever reason, him and I had a really good connection, and we talked a lot, and I kind of had the ability to calm him down. So one day, that's the backstory. So one day, one of the aides came running in my office, and they said, oh my God, Mr. Smith is laying on the floor. He's half under his bed and he won't get up. He keeps telling us he didn't get hurt. He didn't fall. He won't get up. We don't know what to do with him. Can you please come and talk to him? So I said, okay, I'll come. So I go running back there. Mr. Smith, are you okay? What's wrong? And I'm like kneeling on the floor with him because he's literally half under the bed. And so he said, no, I'm fine. And I said, well, did you fall? Like why are you under here? Did you fall? Did you hurt your head? Did you hurt your legs? Did you hurt your hip? Blah, 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 your back, your arms, whatever. I'm like giving him the 3rd degree, and he's laughing at me. He's like, no. And so I'm like, well, do you want to get up? I'll help you up. No, I'm fine. I'm down here and I'm working on my truck. Well, I told you he was a mechanic. They lived on a farm. The last car that he had was a Ford F-150 bright fire engine red truck, and he loved it. It was his favorite truck. Well, he had a twin bed that had a bright red bedspread on it, and he thought he was working on his truck. So when I get down there and I'm looking under the bed, all he's doing, and I don't know if you could see me, but all he's doing is rubbing his 3 fingers together like this. And sometimes they have like a really sensitive sensation there, so they can kind of feel that. So a lot of times if you see people like tapping or, making noises with their hands or their fingers or rubbing them. It's because they can really feel that. Anyways, that's all he was doing under the bed. And so I called my maintenance director to come and help me look to make sure, is there any way he could get hurt? And we figured it out, and he wasn't going to get hurt. And so I told the aides, let him stay there. He's working on his truck. Go check on him every 5 minutes and see if he's okay. And I'm going to go call his wife. So I called his wife and I said, listen, I just want to let you know, in case you come walking through the door, your husband is on the floor. He's laying half under the bed, and he is so happy because he thinks he's working on his truck. And so we've checked him. He's fine. He didn't fall. We're going to let him stay there and work on his truck. And, I'll let you know when he gets up. Well, he stayed under there for 45 minutes. He was so happy. That was like his favorite activity of the whole entire week. It made him so happy because he fixed his truck. And so I guess the whole reason in me telling you that sort of long story is because, at first, when you look and we have a resident laying half under the bed, we think, are they causing harm to themselves or others? Well, yes, they're going to get hurt. Maybe they're already hurt, right? But when we take a second to look into it, we realize this actually turned out to be a great thing for him. And he wasn't causing harm to anyone. He wasn't hurting anyone. He was not hurting himself. And so it was fine. And so again, my point is sometimes we really have to think about that question, because at first we think, yes, of course, but really kind of dive into it and think about that. Okay, so in review, we detect and connect physical needs, emotional needs, and then reassess and plan. So we want to diffuse the situation. We're not trying to convince them of the truth. We're meeting them in their world, understanding where they're at. We're identifying these triggers. We're trying to understand the feeling behind the behavior. We want to try to be positive, calm, provide reassurance. We're here, you're safe, everything's okay. We want to watch our nonverbal communication. We want to be empathetic, maybe apologize, even if it has nothing to do with us, even if it's not our fault, right? We want to validate, don't orient them and try to be distracting. Whatever they're thinking, it's valid in their mind. Accept the fact that we need to enter into their world. Structure is great. They need a routine. It's really good for them. A schedule, change in surroundings or adjusting environment can cause confusion. We want to set them up for success. We want to help them to do what they want if we can. And set them up to be successful. We want purposeful activities. Try not to take things personal. And it's so much easier said than done, because you're looking at this person saying, well, this is my husband, or this is my mom, or this is my dad. How are they sitting here yelling at me? How are they saying these things to me? How could they possibly accuse me of stealing their purse or their checkbook or taking their money or cheating on them, or, all of these things that happen all of the time? We have to just take a step back and think, this is not mom or dad. This is not husband or wife. This is mom or dad or husband or wife with their brain that is not working properly, with a brain that is broken, thinking these things, right? And I know that's so very hard to do, but really try to just remember that. It's, they're not purposely trying to act this way or beat up on us, mentally or physically. They're not trying to be accusatory on purpose. This is just happening. This is part of what is happening to them. So one thing, as I come to a conclusion before any questions, one thing I really, really, really want to kind of hone in on is the helpline. I feel like I talk about it all the time. It's on my website. I tell everyone about it, but so many people still don't realize that it's a thing. And this helpline is through the Alzheimer's Association. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, nights, weekends, holidays, whatever. 3 o'clock in the morning, your husband wakes you up and you feel like you're ready to lose your mind, you can call them. It's not for emergencies. If you have a medical emergency, you call 911 or your doctor, but this is for any sort of help. You know, it can just be that you're frustrated. It could be a question about the disease. It could be whatever, but it is available all of the time. So please, please share this with people. Take advantage of this wonderful resource. And the other thing I really wanted to talk about are support groups. I have been a support group facilitator through the Alzheimer's Association for over 12 years now, I think, between Ohio, where I live, and Pennsylvania, where I do a lot of work. And I cannot tell you how invaluable they are to the members and to myself as a facilitator. You know, it sort of becomes like a little family. And, you know, you think, you know, we always say every month, oh, I was thinking about you guys and I had to remember to tell you this is what happened. Or, you know, it's just so helpful. And it's hard to explain because you think, what is it going to do to help sit there for an hour or an hour and a half talking about my problems? You really can't imagine until you try it. So please, if you have not tried a support group, please give it a try. And I really think that you will find it as such a great resource. And if you need to look for support groups, you can also call the helpline for that or look on the website, alz.org. So that brings us to a conclusion. I am happy to take any questions. So if anyone has any questions, I guess are we putting them in the chat or unmuting ourselves, or however we're taking questions? I'm ready if we have any.
We are, Melissa, and thank you so much for your excellent presentation today. We're grateful for your time and talent serving not only as a volunteer community educator with the association, but also your service as a support group facilitator. So thank you so much for your time and talent today and throughout the year.
My pleasure.
I think you did such a fabulous job with the presentation today that I actually don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A. So that tells me you covered everything perfectly. So,
very good.
So I'll keep, you know, in the next few minutes as we segue into our lunch break, I'll keep an eye out to see if anything pops up in the chat or the Q&A. But right now I don't see any new questions, and we've been putting some additional resources and links in the chat as well. So, so hopefully everyone got what they needed out of the presentation. So thank you again, Melissa.
Very good. You're welcome.
As we prepare to transition into our lunch break, I do want to point out and to everyone that we will have a 5-minute video forthcoming. It's a cooking demonstration on how to make a healthy kale frittata. We thank our partner, Penn State Extension, for providing this cooking demonstration video. And we will also share the recipe on a slide during the lunch break, and we'll be sending it out in our post-event communications along with other resources. So stay tuned for that brief video and recipe coming up. We will take a lunch break now, and we ask that everyone, we will begin the second half of our program this afternoon with our resources in my community panel discussion promptly at 12:45. So if everyone would please plan to get back online with us and rejoin prior to 12:45 so that we can get started and end on time this afternoon, we would appreciate that. And again, please stay tuned for our kale frittata video and recipe. Thank you all. And thank you again, Melissa.
My pleasure. Sorry, I was on mute.
Incorporating healthy foods into your diet doesn't have to be overwhelming. Through the Penn State Extension Nutrition Links video series, you'll learn how to buy, store, cook, and enjoy a variety of produce. In this video, we will look at kale. Kale is usually dark green. You may also hear about dinosaur kale, sometimes called black kale, which is dark bluish green and has a sweeter taste. Other varieties include scarlet kale, which has green leaves and red veins. Kale is mostly available in the fall. However, it may also be found in winter or spring. Kale has 35 calories per serving, which is either 1 cup of raw kale or 1/2 cup cooked kale. It is a great source of vitamin A and vitamin C. It is also a good source of calcium and potassium, which helps with lowering the risk of cancer and cardiovascular disease, and which helps the immune system work properly. You can eat kale raw or cooked. Raw kale has more vitamin C in it, but cooked kale still provides us with almost half of our daily needs of vitamin C. When selecting kale, choose dark-colored bunches with small to medium-sized leaves. Avoid kale with brown or yellow leaves. To store it, wash unwrapped kale in damp paper towels, then place it in a plastic bag and store it in the vegetable crisper in your refrigerator. Use kale within 5 days. The longer you store kale, the stronger and more bitter its flavor becomes. Before preparing kale, first rinse it under running water to remove any dirt. Preparing fresh kale for various recipes is simple. Kale can be enjoyed in many ways, such as kale chips and soups. Salads are a great way to use kale, since it makes a good substitute for spinach or lettuce. The baked kale frittata dish is a delicious meal that you can make for your family. For this recipe, you will need 3 cups kale. This can be fresh or canned. 1 cup onion, 1/2 teaspoon chopped fresh garlic, 1 tablespoon of oil, 1/2 cup water, 6 eggs, 1/2 cup milk, 1/2 cup cheddar cheese, 1/4 teaspoon pepper. First, preheat the oven to 375 degrees. Next, spray a pan with non-fat vegetable cooking spray. Rinse and drain the kale using a colander. Remove the stems and chop the kale. Peel and chop the onion. Heat the oil in a large frying pan on medium heat. Add the onion and garlic. Cook for 3 to 5 minutes, stirring until the onions are soft. Stir in the kale and water. Cover and cook for 5 minutes. Then remove the pan from the stove. In a large bowl, combine the eggs, milk, shredded cheese, and pepper. Then add the onion and kale to this mixture. Pour the mixture into the prepared 9-inch round baking pan and bake for 25 minutes. Once the frittata reaches 160 degrees Fahrenheit, remove it from the oven and let it set for 2 to 3 minutes. Slice it into wedges and enjoy. This recipe is a great source of vitamin A and C and protein, and it also has a good source of calcium and dietary fiber. So remember, dark green kale is the best to choose at the store, and it's most common in fall. You can eat it cooked or raw, and raw has more vitamins. For more information on kale, other Pennsylvania produce, and the Nutrition Links program, visit the Penn State Extension website. Incorporating healthy foods into your diet doesn't have to be overwhelming. Through the Penn State Extension Nutrition Links video series, you'll learn how to buy, store, cook, and enjoy a variety of produce. In this video, we will look at kale. Kale is usually dark green. You may also hear about dinosaur kale, sometimes called black kale, which is dark bluish green and has a sweeter taste. Other varieties include scarlet kale, which has green leaves and red veins. Kale is mostly available in the fall. However, it may also be found in winter or spring. Kale has 35 calories per serving, which is either 1 cup of raw kale or 1/2 cup cooked kale. It is a great source of vitamin A and vitamin C. It is also a good source of calcium and potassium, which helps with lowering the risk of cancer and cardiovascular disease, and which helps the immune system work properly. You can eat kale raw or cooked. Raw kale has more vitamin C in it, but cooked kale still provides us with almost half of our daily needs of vitamin C. When selecting kale, choose dark-colored bunches with small to medium-sized leaves. Avoid kale with brown or yellow leaves. To store it, wash unwrapped kale in damp paper towels, then place it in a plastic bag and store it in the vegetable crisper in your refrigerator. Use kale within 5 days. The longer you store kale, the stronger and more bitter its flavor becomes. Before preparing kale, first rinse it under running water to remove any dirt. Preparing fresh kale for various recipes is simple. Kale can be enjoyed in many ways, such as kale chips and soups. Salads are a great way to use kale, since it makes a good substitute for spinach or lettuce. The baked kale frittata dish is a delicious meal that you can make for your family. For this recipe, you will need 3 cups kale. This can be fresh or canned. 1 cup onion, 1/2 teaspoon chopped fresh garlic, 1 tablespoon of oil, 1/2 cup water, 6 eggs, 1/2 cup milk, 1/2 cup cheddar cheese, 1/4 teaspoon pepper. First, preheat the oven to 375 degrees. Next, spray a pan with non-fat vegetable cooking spray. Rinse and drain the kale using a colander. Remove the stems and chop the kale. Peel and chop the onion. Heat the oil in a large frying pan on medium heat. Add the onion and garlic. Cook for 3 to 5 minutes, stirring until the onions are soft. Stir in the kale and water. Cover and cook for 5 minutes. Then remove the pan from the stove. In a large bowl, combine the eggs, milk, shredded cheese, and pepper. Then add the onion and kale to this mixture. Pour the mixture into the prepared 9-inch round baking pan and bake for 25 minutes. Once the frittata reaches 160 degrees Fahrenheit, remove it from the oven and let it set for 2 to 3 minutes. Slice it into wedges and enjoy. This recipe is a great source of vitamin A and C and protein, and it also has a good source of calcium and dietary fiber. So remember, dark green kale is the best to choose at the store, and it's most common in fall. You can eat it cooked or raw, and raw has more vitamins. For more information on kale, other Pennsylvania produce, and the Nutrition Links program, visit the Penn State Extension website.
Well, welcome back, everyone. It's really enjoyable to return with you here today, and we hope you're enjoying our symposium. My name is Art DiLoretto. I currently serve as the Deputy Director for the Pennsylvania Association of Area Agencies on Aging, commonly known as P4A. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you our moderator for our next panel. He's Matt Trott. Matt currently serves as the Area Agency on Aging Director for Erie County under the Greater Erie Community Action Committee. Matt brings to his position over 25 years of experience with community needs, care management responses, and coordination of service provider networks. Starting first with FEMA, Matt has served in a variety of positions under GCAC, as a planning and development specialist, deputy director, and since 2015 as the Area Agency on Aging director. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Matt Trott. Matt?
Thanks, Art. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. We have a very good panel this afternoon. I want to share one thing. The goal, I hope, is we want to get to a place where community-based organizations work with health plans to achieve a greater health and wellness for the entire population. So we're hoping to get there, and we hope these resources we provide here with our panelists can help you get there too. Over my many years of experience, there are two primary truths I want to start with that I think every, not only provider, but caregiver and family member should have in the back of their mind. The first one is trust. You have to, no matter who you contact or who you get your information from, make sure it's someone that you trust or an entity that you trust. Whether it's legal or financial advice, caregiving is just as important to make sure that you get the right, correct, and unbiased information for caregiving for your loved ones. So it's important to trust. The second one is choice. No matter how you fulfill your caregiving needs or how you get those needs met, you want to make sure that you always remember that the older adult or a designated family member or representative has the ultimate choice in who provides that care. I can tell you in my 25 years experience, that's one of the most difficult things right now to do during a current direct care worker shortage, as well as the pandemic crisis that we're in. But realize you always have choice for who provides that care. So with those two things, trust and choice as a background, I'm going to be talking about the four esteemed panelists that we have. We have Troy from the Department of Aging. We have Melissa from the Pennsylvania Link. I think we have Kristen online from the United Way 211, as well as David from Misericordia University. This great panel was put together, and I want to thank Alzheimer's Association, AARP, and the Pennsylvania Association of Area Agencies on Aging, who gathered each of these panelists so that we can ask them to spend a few minutes to give us some resources, as well as they can each introduce themselves and they can tell us their organization and their years of experience. If they could also make sure that listeners get the information they want. So we will be allowing anyone on the call to put in any questions they have in the question and answer part of the Zoom meeting. And once we hear from all the panelists, then if you could then circle back and we will answer questions. So once again, each panelist, I think, will answer 2 questions that I think are key for all of us in the caregiving realm. And the first one is, what are the best resources from your area of expertise that you've seen to help caregivers? And the second one is, how can caregivers access and navigate those resources provided? To begin with, we have Troy Johnston, who's with the Pennsylvania Department of Aging, and Troy oversees the caregiver support program that we at Area Agencies on Aging also offer. So I will turn it over to Troy.
Oh, thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. And I also appreciate the opportunity to meet with you today. As Matt said, my name is Troy Johnston, and I currently work as the Caregiver Support Program Coordinator within the Pennsylvania Department of Aging. Prior to working with the department, I worked within the Department of Human Services in various programs and capacities. And overall, I have nearly 32 years of experience working in the field of social services. As for a favorite quote, one that is very important to me and serves as a personal mantra comes from the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And here's an excerpt of that quote. Everyone can be great because everyone can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. And speaking of serving, the Pennsylvania Department of Aging works to ensure that older adults across Pennsylvania have access to quality services and supports needed to age and live well. To that end, the department's mission is to promote independence, purpose, and well-being in the lives of older adults through advocacy, service, and protection. Through its network of 52 area agencies on aging, or AAAs, the Department of Aging offers benefits and services designed to enable older adults to remain and thrive in their homes for as long as possible. The department is also dedicated to the vision of an aging-friendly Pennsylvania, where older adults are not only empowered to live with dignity, but also embraced as valuable members of their communities. Many of you know very intimately the challenges caregivers face in providing care to loved ones in need of assistance and support. As such, caregivers are in need of services and supports themselves to successfully navigate this critical role. As part of its mission, the department is committed to helping meet the needs of caregivers, and one of the most impactful ways to achieve this goal is through the Caregiver Support Program. The Caregiver Support Program provides resources and assistance to help alleviate the stress associated with caregiving and support the caregiving relationship. Though many of the department's programs focus on the older adult with unmet care needs, the Caregiver Support Program is unique in that it focuses primarily on the caregiver's well-being and directly addresses their needs. The program is administered by a network of 52 area agencies on aging, which serve all 67 counties across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The program offers caregivers vital supports and services such as care management, benefits counseling, and caregiver education and training, as well as financial reimbursement of approved caregiving-related expenses related to respite care, incontinence supplies, nutritional supplements, pest control and fumigation services, home modifications, and assistive devices. Monthly reimbursement amount received by caregivers who are enrolled in the program is determined using a sliding scale based on the care receiver's household income. To be eligible for the program, all caregivers and their care receivers must be residents of Pennsylvania. In addition, caregivers must be the primary caregiver. In other words, an adult family member or other person who is primarily responsible for the provision of care for at least one of the following individuals: a functionally dependent older adult age 60 and over, a person of any age living with Alzheimer's disease or other chronic dementia, a relative child under 18 years of age, or an adult with a non-dementia related disability. Caregivers enrolled in the Caregiver Support Program are assigned a care manager from their local AAA who will conduct a comprehensive assessment called a Caregiver Assessment Tool, or CAT for short, with the caregiver and their care receiver present as well in the care receiver's home or where the caregiving takes place. The purpose of the in-home assessment is to determine the caregiver's needs, identify potential areas of support, and work with them to develop a person-centered plan of care. Please note that the services provided through the Caregiver Support Program are not an entitlement and are subject to eligibility requirements. All other available resources for caregivers at the local, state, and federal level must be considered and utilized before the program services are provided. However, resources available through other social services programs may be received concurrently as long as there is no duplication of benefits. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge those who have stepped up and answered the call to care for their loved ones and the tremendous sacrifices made on their behalf. To all who are caregivers, I say to you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that concludes my presentation. I thank you for your time and attention, and will now turn it back over to Matt.
Thank you, Troy. Your quote from Dr. King is I've heard many times recently, especially during this caregiving crisis. It is a great one, and you're so right that the caregivers are such a valued and thankful position. So thank you for that, Troy. For everyone else on the call, Troy said that the area agencies on aging conducted the caregiver support program locally. So I encourage everyone to contact your local area agency on aging, or the one way you can do that is also contact your linked Aging and Disabilities Resource Center, and that's our segue. And I'll introduce Melissa Botoff, who's the Aging and Disabilities PA Link Coordinator. So Melissa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'm really happy to be here. I am considered the lead link coordinator for Service Area 8, which is a region that covers from Center County, 9 counties eastward to Schuylkill County. And I have been working with the PA Link program now for 5 years, but I have been working with aging and specifically Alzheimer's and dementia for about 20 years. Which is really hard for me to believe since I'm still 29. But I tried to choose a quote about our services a little bit, and instead I tried to take something just to give you guys all a taste of what I'd be talking about today. So about PA Link, the vision behind PA Link is to establish in every community highly visible and trusted sources of information to help seniors and those with disabilities find long-term support and access to the resources they need to remain safe and independent. I will talk about another quote during my presentation, and that is, it takes a village. And we all know as caregivers and professionals that it certainly takes a village to care for the ones that we love. So a lot of times I get the question about, oh, what is PA Link? And then people will immediately follow with that with, oh, it's Career Link, right? And PA Link is actually not anything to do with Career Link. They're responsible for getting people jobs, and we're responsible for another very important aspect. And we are a state and a federal initiative that is intended to help seniors and people with disabilities access the services and the care that they need. And the way that we do that is through the No Wrong Door approach. That's a federal initiative through the Department of Human Services. And really the idea behind the idea of No Wrong Door is that if you as a consumer or a caregiver were to call somebody and try to get some information and they maybe wouldn't know what to do, instead of saying, sorry, nope, I can't help you, we want a system where they can at least find information or point them in the right direction to somewhere else to go. So that's kind of the whole idea behind the No Wrong Door approach. And it's something that our program has as our backbone of what we try to do and help. We always want our consumers, and in this case, our caregivers too. We know that's usually the case, especially when somebody has dementia, to really understand and help navigate the system. We all know how difficult and hard that system can be. And we are able to help people. They may not qualify for every program, but we can help people regardless of their assets or income We're really able to help anyone over the age of 60, or if somebody has that disability, even if they're under the age 60 mark. So the goal of our program is really to help better support consumers and have them and their wishes and what they really want to achieve. We want to empower them to understand their options. You know, just as Matthew was saying in the beginning, it's all about trust and options, and we want people to really understand that. And then how to navigate the long-term supports and services. As caregivers, and that's why many of you are here today, you're trying to learn how to navigate that system. And unfortunately, it's not easy and it's not quick, but one of the main goals of our program is to help navigate that the best that we can. So in Pennsylvania, just a couple of things, because we are federally funded, something like PA Link exists everywhere. So if you were to be a snowbird in Florida or move to California or out helping someone else in California, a program like PA Link will exist there. They're probably not called PA Link, but instead would be called something like ADRC, the Aging and Disability Resource Center, or an ADRO. And that's usually what we would tell people who maybe are relocating or looking to help a loved one in another state. Hey, look for some of these terms. This is probably someone who does something like we do. And then in Pennsylvania, like I said, I am the local lead coordinator and I cover my 9 counties in our central region, I guess it would be called. But there's somebody like me in every county of the state. So we have our local lead coordinators who are truly the boots on the ground and are trying to do stuff every day at the very, very basic local level. And then we also have several regional coordinators, and then we also have a state director who is officially in the office of the Pennsylvania Department of Aging in Harrisburg. I say officially, that's pre-pandemic. But our goal as local lead coordinators are really to collaborate with other organizations and partners. We want to help educate everyone, and that means consumers as well as professionals. And we just want to partner up as best we can at that local level. So the ways that we help are we really try to find the unmet needs, and we try to fill those gaps and help in the transition of the consumer to live longer, to be more independent, whatever their goals may be. That's what we want to do. We want to find those gaps and try to help fill them at the local level. One thing that I really want to share with everybody is a great takeaway for today is our program has a call center. So that is staffed, normal business hours, normal business week. But if you ever have any questions or really at a loss of where to go or what to do, we always recommend that you reach out to our call center. And I will put that number in the link, but I will also tell you it's 1-800-753-8827. And the individuals that staff that call center are really great at figuring out what you might need and where to point you. And that's the whole job of our PA Link. So we would always encourage people to reach out using that call line. We also do a lot of what we call partnership development. So we really act as a clearinghouse to keep updated information and contacts, which if you work or you're working or trying to coordinate in the healthcare industry, sometimes that can be difficult. That's a full-time job some days, is keeping our partnership list updated. But that's the way that we can really make sure that our consumers are getting the best information and the information that they need. So we continue to have a list of organizations, whether that's skilled nursing, music therapy, a whole list of people that may be able to provide some resources. We always build that list. And then from there, we also build the relationship. So we want our professionals to really understand, you know, it's not knowing someone just by email or an elevator speech, but we want our local professionals to have meaningful relationships so that when questions come up or when there's an individual with Alzheimer's that's really having some trouble, that we as a community and that as a village can really work together to make things happen. And then ultimately, we also provide professional trainings and conferences. And that way we're bringing excellent speakers and good training to our local level so that those professionals are also trained well and understand the latest developments and things that are going on. We also do community events and outreach. Again, for my region, we found an unmet need. Many people were having some issues with social isolation. So we created a check-in line to help with that. And then another key takeaway, in addition to our phone number, is our person-centered counseling. So each PA Link service area has a group of trained, what we call person-centered counselors. And what we do is we want to, again, in coordination with our goals, is we want to make sure that the individual is making their own decisions. We know if they're driving the bus, that they're likely to keep on driving and follow through with things. So person-centered counseling is really a great way for somebody that has maybe more than one need of a way for them to work with one of these person-centered counselors and try to figure out a way to really help them stay independent and find what they need. I always look at long-term care as a very long spectrum. You know, some people are very independent and may just need a little help at the beginning. And of course, at the other end, people need a lot more needs. But person-centered counselors is a free service, and it's something that really can help the people in the middle. They might know where they want to go. And I always use a car analogy. I say, we talk about where you want to go. We can point you in the right direction. We can even give you a map and put you in the car, but we let you drive the car and make your own decisions. And then guess what? We'll check and make sure that you got there. So that's how I like to look at person-centered counseling as another option of PA Link, and how things are really available to help not only those with dementia, but consumers and caregivers at all levels. And I think that's it. I will put that information in the chat and be happy to answer the questions.
Thanks, Melissa. Melissa's so right that it takes not only a village, but all of the community. The link meetings in our service area, I know, are just critical and vital for the professionals and providers to share information, and using the resources through the Aging Disabilities Resource Center and PA Links has really been great. So thank you very much, Melissa. One of the other ways that caregivers on the call can find out what's available in their local community, especially for those that do have internet access and resources, is the United Way. We're lucky to have Kristen Roth here from United Way 211, and I'll turn it over to Kristen.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm Kristen Rotz. I serve as president of United Way of Pennsylvania and executive director of 211. I've been in this role for 7 years, but my whole career, well, most of my career, 16 years of my career, has been focused on advocacy, and all of that has had interaction with advocating for human services. So I have a lot of experience related to our topic today. And the quote that I chose for today is that alone, I can't change the world, but I can certainly cast a stone which will create a ripple. And I hope that the practical resources that I can share with you today will create a ripple in your own pool to be able to help you support the people that you care about. I do have a quick presentation to share with you. And here it is. So Pennsylvania 211 is a statewide service. And that's important to know. No matter where you are in our state, you have the opportunity to connect with 211 in many different channels. We also serve customers on a website, through a phone line, through texting, and web chat. So there's lots of options here that suit your needs. Our mission is to offer a service which is the first and most essential resource to all Pennsylvanians. Important to note that the people who answer our calls and respond to our texts, they are all highly trained experts. They also are available 24/7, 365. So this is another differentiator from the services that you've already heard about. We are available to you outside of normal business hours. So we really take our mission seriously to provide connections to local resources. And we do that not just through having a contact center, but we also do that by having local community resource data experts who are actively out curating information about what services are available in different zip codes and different counties across the state. This is a little bit more about our service. It's important to know this is for everyone. There's no income qualifier on it. It is for absolutely anyone who needs help with some kind of health and human services related issue. We do get a lot of calls about basic needs, assistance with food, assistance with utilities and housing. That's our top call volume. So if you or someone you care about are struggling with those basic needs, 211 is a resource for that, as well as some other types of supports that are available specifically for caregivers. And I would also mention that if you have difficulty remembering a 1-800 phone number, but you want to know how to get in touch with your ADRC, your link, or you want to know how to get in touch with your AAA, that is all information that 211 has and can point you in the right direction as well. So coming away from today's presentation, if it's hard to remember where to start, you can always start at 211. I mentioned the people who are curating community resources. We do curate resources from government as well as from faith-based partners and other nonprofit partners. All of the resources that are listed in our database for the public are either provided for free or on some type of sliding fee scale based on income. So we are here at 211 to listen to needs and then try to connect you to services. I mentioned we're available by phone. We also have a texting service. If you wanted to engage in a conversation with 211 by text, you would simply text your zip code to 898-211. Here I will note that in some regions of our state, text is only available during normal business hours. If you would text in whenever someone is not available to respond to you, you would get an automatic message reply back that would say, either call us or contact us during normal business hours. The last piece of contact opportunity with 211 is our comprehensive website at pa211.org, which I'll take some time to show you here in a minute. So we do have a number of resources for caregivers in our database existing. And when we go out to the website, I'll show you how you can self-serve some of those resources. But here are some of the categories. So there are definitely support groups for you as caregivers. There's some caregiver training available. There's also some services related to sort of assessing needs and handling some of the other related issues that can come with legal representation or some respite care, even non-emergency medical transportation. I will say that we curate resources as they are available. So in rural communities, some of these resources are harder to come by, but it is definitely worth a look to see what's available in your area, and the 211 website can provide this sorted by zip code. So I'm going to take you out now to our 211 website. I'm just going to momentarily stop my share and bring up another one. Okay, so this is pa211.org, and we're live here. I'm going to show you how you can access resources that will be most relevant to the audience today. When you get to our homepage, we do recommend that you use our guided search. It is the quickest and easiest way to get to the types of resources you are seeking. And as I mentioned, there are caregiver resources and senior specific resources, but we have plenty of options here to look for help with basic needs and mental health services. And we have some seasonal needs that we feature as well. But for many of you, the most relevant here will be this icon that says older adults. 55 plus is our category for older adults. And once you click on that icon, it takes you into the next level of information about the types of categories of service that we have available. So we'll drill down here on caregivers. And this is where you start to see the segmentation of some of the resources I talked about. So if we go to caregiver counseling, this is what it's going to give you the opportunity to be able to drill down closer to your location. So I will say that I'm helping someone and I am here today in 17043. So I will type in that for my search. So this is going to scale it down from looking at the whole state to looking at my nearby area. And what you can see here are the 4 most relevant and closest providers of service that match up with caregiver supports as I selected earlier. So this allows you to see some basic information about the types of services that are available, location, often some eligibility information, and can give you a sense of whether there are special hours for the program that you would need to be available or be aware of if you're going to reach out for some assistance. So again, this is just a really easy way to self-serve information. The website is great for that. Again, you can use it any time of day. You can do it at your own pace and your own schedule. But we do have the phone contact center, and we recognize there are many areas of the Commonwealth where internet connectivity is an issue. So we're very much committed to maintaining that person-to-person contact option at 211. So for those of you who don't have internet access, you don't prefer to look for resources this way, you are certainly welcome and encouraged to call 211 at any time and talk to the specialist there about what kinds of supports or services that you or your loved one may need. And they will do their best to connect you to what we know is available in the community. So again, just remember, this is a 24/7, 365 service, many different ways for you to reach out, including the website, as well as texting and phone and web chat. And I hope that this will be a valuable resource that many of you can take advantage of.
Thanks, Kristen. That's such a key thing, especially that we learned during this pandemic with social isolation and such, that individuals need a way to reach out to get information. And thank you and United Way and 211 for that. The fourth panelist we have today is David Haj, and David is from Misericordia University, and he has a lot of initials next to his name, which means he has a lot of certifications. And I've known in my experience that all those with those letters after their name mean they have a lot of good information to share. So I'll turn it over to David.
Thanks, Matt. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. My name is David Haig, and I am a social worker. I've been in practice for 16 years and have done a lot of my work in clinical and medical social work, particularly working with older adults at Misericordia University. Been there for the last 6 years in the social work department. And over the last 3 years, I've been involved with the gerontology minor at the undergraduate level and a geriatric care management post-professional certificate, both of which have curricular content focused on dementia care. So if anybody's interested in terms of finding some more information out about training professionally, that's available. I'm also a geriatric care manager, or what's now called an aging life care professional. So I'll talk a little bit about that and what that means. So the quote that I'd like to start out with today is from former First Lady Rosalind Carter, and it's one that I feel is very relevant to our discussion today. There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who've been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. I myself have been a caregiver for a person with dementia, and this topic is close to my heart personally. And it's always great to see colleagues from these helpful agencies and all the resources that are available. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how an aging life care manager or a geriatric care manager could be of assistance. And we'll talk a little bit about level of care transitions, a topic that often comes up and is on people's minds. So an aging life care manager used to be called a geriatric care manager. It's typically a holistic, client-centered approach for caring for older adults or those facing health challenges. There's a website called aginglifecare.org, and there's a really great directory there where you can search in your geographic region for somebody who would be available to provide this level of assistance. But the 4 main functions that aging life care professionals might be able to provide you with as a caregiver would be assessment and monitoring. So they can actually go into a home or a care environment and help provide some additional assessment and monitoring for you. For example, let's say you live out of town and your loved one is receiving care in another geographic area. They could be a go-between and somebody to provide some assistance. Planning and problem solving. So even if we know what the right resources are, sometimes we need some assistance in navigating the challenges of the healthcare system, and aging life care professionals can do that. We also can provide education and advocacy. So sometimes we may need some additional information to move forward with our decisions regarding healthcare and caregiving. And sometimes we might have felt like we hit a wall and we need somebody to stand with us and act as an advocate. And certainly aging life care managers are well positioned to do that. The other thing we could do is family caregiver coaching. So sometimes you need someone to stand with you and kind of provide that support, but also encouragement and guidance through particular issues or periods of time in caregiving. And so aging life care professionals have 8 core focus knowledge areas. So we're pretty well versed in general with health and disability related issues. So we're familiar with different systems and how somebody with dementia or caregivers, for example, might interface with those different levels of care. It can be really complex, and sometimes some assistance there is helpful. We can also help make referrals to financial planners or people to help with bill paying, things like that sometimes. Housing related issues, so whether that's aging in place or transitioning to another level of care or moving in with a family member. There are a lot of different models that we'll talk about in the levels of care. And then family issues. So sometimes there's disagreements about how care should be proceeded with. And aging life care managers can certainly act as a mediator sometimes, a neutral party that's there to keep in mind the needs of the care recipient and the whole family and try and help find some middle ground. We can also act as advocates. So maybe there's a situation where you feel somebody needs some push to move forward through a particular block or issue, and we could sometimes help with that. We can also make referrals to legal professionals or for assistance with a living will, power of attorney, those types of things. While we don't directly provide that, we can help connect people to those resources. And also for crisis intervention. So most of the phone calls that we get as aging life care professionals involve a point of crisis. So something went bad and we need some assistance to work through it. So in addition to the aging life care professional role, through this type of work, I've worked in acute care hospital settings as a skilled nursing facility social worker, educating health professionals, and as a practicing geriatric care manager. So these are some resources that I'd like to leave you with as well. So the first one, it's from a psychiatrist, Dr. Mark Gronin. He has a really great book called Alzheimer's Disease and Other Dementias that would certainly be worth picking up, very reasonably priced. But he talks about the 6 E's that help caregivers enhance their quality of life. So he would encourage you to educate yourself about the available resources and the disease process. So the things we've been talking about in this presentation, all very helpful in that end, to empower ourselves as caregivers. So that would be utilizing the resources and the things available to us to, help move forward with the care needs of the person we're involved with assisting. And also to think about the environment. What's the environment like of the person receiving care, and for you as the person giving care? How can we modify that? Does that involve enhancing safety or adding particular things that can make it more convenient or helpful? The other part is to engage with others. And so we need community in our lives and support. So that would be connecting to the support groups and using the excellent resources that we've talked about. We also need to energize. So we do need a little bit of respite. We need some time to rest and to refresh ourselves. A wise mentor of mine once said, the extent that we don't help ourselves is proportionate to our inability to help others. So what is it that we can do to refresh ourselves or get some rest or respite at times? And so can we have other family members, informal caregivers, formal caregivers, some respite stay at a facility temporarily? What can we do to help make sure that your needs as a caregiver are met? And also to have discussions about endpoints. So what's the trajectory of a disease process and your individual family member care situation? So what is it that we should expect with this particular illness and how we can move forward? Some other good resources, I mentioned the Aging Life Care Association, so you could get some great assistance there in locating an aging life care manager in your area. We've talked about the Alzheimer's Association helpline. That's another excellent resource. The link to Aging and Disability Resources that was already mentioned, a frequent one that I like to refer people to. The Area Agency on Aging locator we've discussed. That's an excellent way to link into support in your community and to know that you're getting trusted, reliable resources. The PA Senior Center locator, so engaging in social ways, that's also very important as well. There's a great resource called benefits.gov where you can see what resources you might qualify for and entitlements. That's very helpful. Another one's called My Benefits Checkup. It's another resource that you can look at to see what entitlements you might qualify for or programs. Another one I've used with pretty good success is called Aunt Bertha. So you search by your zip code and you could find some great resources. When we talk about the levels of care real quickly here, there's a benefit called aid and attendance that if you are a veteran or your spouse was a veteran and you meet the qualification criteria, you might be able to get some caregiving funding assistance either at home or that's transferable between care environments. So just real quickly, I'll go from maybe the most intensive level of support to more outpatient type support environments. And so the first one would be called a long-term acute care hospital, which is for somebody who's maybe in the sickest type of environment, like they're just coming from a hospital, maybe an ICU, and they're not appropriate to go to a skilled nursing facility because maybe they have some complicated wounds that need to be addressed, or maybe they're on mechanical ventilation and need to be weaned off of that eventually. So in this environment, you would often get therapy, but it'd be a little bit less intensive and frequent to start off, and we'd be focused on addressing those really complex medical issues, but you're still not at that point where you should still be in an acute care hospital. So the next environment that we would look at would be what's called an IRF, an inpatient rehab facility. So at this level of care, you have to be expected to be able to return home. So let's say, you broke a hip, you're in the hospital, and the doctor thinks that you have a good shot at returning home to your prior environment, even with a little bit of help. Maybe this level of care would be a good fit. You have to be able to tolerate 2 or 3 hours of therapy a day. It's much more aggressive, but for the right candidate, it could certainly be a good fit. And that includes some people with dementia as well. And so you would typically be there maybe about 7 to 10 days, 2 weeks, not as long perhaps as the long-term acute care hospital or the LTAC or LTAC-H. The next level of care that we would look at for rehabilitation or potentially permanent placement could be a skilled nursing facility level of care. And here, this would be for somebody who may or may not be able to return home. Some people can go for a temporary rehab stay for up to 100 days. The caveat there is it may not be the full 100 days, and it might be the amount of time. Let's say after 27 days, you reach your maximum potential and your needs can be met at home, then you might go home after that. Or some people stay on a long-term basis and need some ongoing care that's called more custodial care. So they need that level of hands-on assistance throughout the whole day. After that, we have what's called assisted living or personal care. So that might be in an environment where somebody could generally perform most of the activities they need during the day, but they may need some assistance with their activities of daily living. For example, they may need help in the shower or getting dressed, or reminders about when to take their medication or assistance with that. But generally they can ambulate or walk to the dining room. They could get in and up out of a chair, or they could get to those areas maybe with a wheelchair. There's another model called the medical home. So it's more of a home-based environment where people can stay sometimes. I saw there was a question by someone earlier about respite stay. So I'll mention that at this point too. So you can do what's called a respite stay and either potentially stay at a skilled nursing or an assisted living or personal care facility on a temporary basis. So some people try it before they transition there permanently, or they may do it for a period of time when they need some help to take a break, to go on vacation, for a surgical procedure they may have, or to recover from a health situation. So that's typically, you should know, on a private pay basis. So you kind of have to be aware of that as well. After that, we would get into home health care, which is somebody has to be confined, quote unquote, to their home. So they need some home therapy or nursing care. And they really can't leave the home generally without the assistance of another person. And they might help with medication management, with therapy from physical, occupational therapy, speech therapy. Maybe they need some help with some IVs at home or wound care, those types of issues as well. Then after that, we get to somebody who's maybe needing some rehab, but they're medically stable. So they're generally in a pretty solid place medically, but they still need some outpatient services. So you would then drive to a clinic and you'd get your occupational, physical, or speech therapy services in an outpatient setting. What I found too is a lot of people at that level of care also benefit from the social context of it and interacting with others. So for some who are more social, that's also a really great extra benefit. And then we get into the end of life care type environments with palliative care. So when somebody has a chronic disease diagnosis, maybe like cancer, chronic heart failure, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, they may get involved with palliative care, which would focus on the treatment of symptoms, pain, stresses of a serious illness, and that's regardless of the prognosis. If they're early in that disease process or toward the end stage of it, palliative care could be involved for those reasons. And then we get into hospice care, which is where somebody is at the end of their disease trajectory and facing end of life issues. Typically, people who would qualify for hospice support would be expected to be at less than 6 months of life. If we're talking about inpatient hospice care, it's a much shorter time frame, but we can get some really good nursing, therapy, spiritual care, and medical support for pain management there. I know that was a lot to cover in a short time, but I hope that that might leave you with some understanding of how people might transition through care environments and rehab and maybe placement type environments people might get involved with. And I'll leave you with one other quick last resource, and it's called the Blue Zones. You could look up the Blue Zones Power 9. And so sometimes we hear some challenging messages with caregiving, but I also want to leave you with some things that you could practically do to enhance your own health and the health of the person who needs some assistance as well. And so the Power 9 are 9 key things that you could do to promote your own health and longevity. So the people we've learned this from live in the areas of the world where people have lived the longest and the healthiest, maybe like Okinawa in Japan and Ancaria and Loma Linda in California, a lot of places like that. So I hope those resources are helpful to you, and I wish you all good health and finding some joy and useful resources in your caregiving. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. I know locally Blue Zones is something very active here in Erie, and I know it's huge. One of the biggest lessons from those areas where people live to be 100 and longer is having a support or a social network amongst them, which is why current social isolation is really impactful as we have to keep socially distant from others. We need to keep people interconnected. I also love your quote from Rosalind Carter. You're either pre-caregiver, caregiver, going to be a caregiver, or going to need a caregiver. That hits home at a National American Society on Aging conference. They talked about how with the baby boomers and people living longer, eventually there's going to be a need for more caregivers. And AARP did a great study years ago that talked about the ratio is 4 people in the 300 million United States citizens. There's 4 people that are able to be a caregiver for someone. Or I'm sorry, back then it was 7 people that were able to be a caregiver for someone. There's so many more older adults now, people in need of care, that we're now down to the 1 in 5 ratio. And in a few short years or a decade or so, we're going to be down to the 1 in 4, 1 in 3. And what I love was, just like Rosalind Carter's quote, eventually in 2050 or so, you are either a caregiver or a care receiver, and no one has time to do anything else. So that's very appropriate to our conversation today. These resources are key. One of the other questions that came up was asking about a 30-day time frame. So if all our panelists could come back on, I'd like to kind of address some of those breakpoints. One of the things that I want to impart to all the caregivers on the call is the biggest thing is, how do you pay for this? If you don't have a really good long-term care insurance product, which they're available out there, and those of you that are younger and working age, please look into that. It will save headaches down the road. The other thing is Medicare and Medicaid, and realize those are 2 separate products, although their lines are starting to blur. But Medicare is there for everyone at above a certain age and with certain disabilities, and Medicaid is there for people that just don't have any resources. So those are very impactful systems available to help with the pay. And when you get into this 3 days in a hospital before Medicare starts picking up some of the other resources, and realize that Medicare will not pay for a long, year-long plus stay, that is where either your private resources or your Medicaid system kicks into gear to help pay for some of those. And it really is a different and changing and difficult system to navigate. So if any of our panelists have ways, I know if I look through all the panelists, you know, Troy, the caregiver support program there for reimbursement for caregivers, caregiving needs. I know the link in all of our meetings locally, Melissa helped us to coordinate that transition between those and the payment processes, as well as United Way 211 can also help you to get to the right person to help meet those financial obligations. And then lastly, well, David, like he said, this is such a key concern for everyone in that caregiving role. The systems were not designed for people to live to beyond 100 years old and or retire at age 65 and still be living 35 years later. Plus now there's just so many more older adults in society. So those I'll open it up to any of the panelists that want to also add any more resources that people can use for that financing of those systems.
One thing that I will say is I tend to get the emails or the phone calls of that person that falls through the cracks. So they no longer, you know, they need more than what their Medicare is providing. They don't qualify for Medicaid for some reason, or they're just under the age limit when it comes to working with an aging office, even though they've had the dementia diagnosis. So there's lots of different the people that fall like are just a little bit shy of getting what they need. And a lot of times that's when I, as a PA link coordinator, will try to send that email out to our network and say, hey, I have an individual, they live in this county or this area. Here's what's going on. What can we do? And it's amazing when I do send that email out to the network, how many replies that we get and that we can kind of piecemeal things. It's not the perfect solution, but there may be a church here or there that will offer one way to, you know, build a ramp for them at no charge. And that fixes one problem, and somebody else can do this, and we might be able to get them a little bit from that. So it's just, again, it's that whole village and just getting everybody to work together and collaborate that we can, a lot of times, you know, it's not the perfect solution, but we can try to fill in those gaps until they get the long-term supports and services that they need.
I'd like to also add a great resource would be to talk to a certified elder law attorney sometimes. If you do happen to have some financial resources available, they could certainly help you plan for those eventualities. And I would say, you know, start planning as early in your aging process as is reasonably possible for you. It's never too late to start planning rather than just wait for a crisis. A few other things, if you're a veteran, you could certainly look into the aid and attendance benefit that I had mentioned, which is portable between care environments. So you could start out using it at home, move to an assisted living facility, and then maybe on to a skilled nursing facility, and that can help supplement care. And the other thing is, if you lack the resources but still need the care, you can go into a skilled nursing facility, for example, in a status called medical assistance pending. So let's say we haven't made this transition yet, but you know that your resources won't allow you to privately pay. You could begin that medical assistance application. A lot of facilities will allow you to be at the facility while that application is going through because they know that you'll qualify. So another quick way to think about things here too would be what informal resources are available for care. So sometimes transitioning back into a home environment with a child is possible, or another family member. I've seen some siblings live together. So there are some creative informal resources as well that we could think about.
And just to add to the resources, I know some of the aging offices have also been putting together the pods, like a small mini home that they will put on a family member's property, and helps with some stability there. And there's also some of the other agencies are doing a shared support. So they would look to match up an individual that needs some help with somebody who would and has a home, and then match them with somebody who needs some home placement and put them together so that they're providing an informal care network as well.
Yes, and I'm sorry, Matt.
Go ahead.
In addition to the services available through the Caregiver Support Program that I referenced in my presentation, the Pennsylvania Department of Aging, through its AAA network, offers a vast array of supportive services to caregivers, as well as older adults and individuals living with a disability. And some of those services include home delivered and congregate meals, health and wellness services, advocacy and assistance for residents of nursing homes and long-term care facilities through the Ombudsman Program, home and community-based services through the Options Program, which often is used in sort of conjunction with the Caregiver Support Program. Senior community centers, elder abuse prevention, and assistance with paying for prescription drugs through the PACE program. So those are some really valuable resources that you can receive through the AAA.
And the other things I posted in the chat, one of the things the Pennsylvania Department of Aging puts together a benefits and rights book, which is a great resource. It lists all of those services that the Department of Aging has for older adults, as well as some of those for people with disabilities. So a lot of those things are all part of the, not only the 211 resources, but the PA Link resources, as well as a lot of those things David talked about. And there are many professionals out there to support caregivers. That's the other thing I want to make sure everyone knows. You're not alone. It really feels like you are alone when you're caregiving for an individual and you're in your home or the individual's home, and you really start to burn out. And that is one of those things that we encourage you to contact any of these sources that are here. We see it every day. Area agencies on aging in Pennsylvania are also the Older Adult Protective Services. So we get calls 24/7, 365 days a year for anyone in abuse, neglect, exploitation, or abandonment situations. And we go and respond to those calls and try and pull community resources to make sure they get out of those crisis situations. The best thing anyone can do is call support professionals before you get to those crisis levels. Get support, get help. Area agencies on aging have half of our staff are some kind of care manager. So same thing with Centers for Independent Living. There are a lot of professionals out there that do this daily for many caregivers and families, and there's not a one size fits all. Each families have different dynamics, have different abilities to caregive for someone. A family with 12 kids might have 3 kids that are able to do shift work and caregiving, and other people don't have any family members anymore. They either outlive them or they've moved away. So every situation is unique, which leads me back to the Aging Disabilities Resource Center. Person-centered counseling is a key resource. You want to tell your story, what your needs are, and let the professionals in the systems help to assess those needs so that we can find the most appropriate funding source to pay for those needs. So that is the way the system's designed. There's a lot of professionals, both locally and nationally, to assist with that. And we'll kind of leave it there and see if any of our other panelists want to add on to that. We did have a question earlier. See if I can get to it. The resources that are available. We do know that out there in the community, like was said earlier, sometimes telephone is the way to get. It's also word of mouth. And one of the things that we want to make sure is knowing who to talk to and make sure that you get somebody, like I said earlier, those 2 premises of trust and choice. When you find out who you trust, you're going to talk to your trusted neighbor or friend, or you're going to talk to somebody who's been through this path with an older adult or with someone with disabilities that found a caregiver and made it work. Our earlier session today was a very emotional testament to how people were able to navigate through those difficult situations, especially for those individuals with dementia. And I want to make sure that everyone out there realizes that you want to do that. You want to talk and ask for help and support. That will not only help the mental health of the caregiver, but also will help share your story out there and bring that, like was said earlier, the village, bring the other community resources to bear. And it's key. We see too many times those crisis situations when somebody didn't ask for help early enough, whether they're embarrassed or whether they feel that means they aren't a good caregiver. Caregiving work is very difficult. Know that, and know that it does take a lot of supports to help with someone that needs caregiving, especially like David shared, all those levels and the transitions between those levels and the payment of those supports. The other thing I want to reemphasize is the legal and financial. They go hand in hand with caregiving. An individual needs to plan out their legal representation, and they also need to plan out their financial long-term care. And I always say that nobody has a nest egg big enough to spend 10 years in a long-term care facility at nearly $100,000 a year. So realize that eventually everybody's going to need support, whether that's federal government with Medicare and Medicaid or state governments with Medicaid and all the other local supports that are available. Like Troy said, area agencies on aging are there with a lottery funding in Pennsylvania to assist. We've been doing this work for 30 some years, 40 years, and we will continue to be there because the lottery is there. And we want to try and do as many preventative services ahead of time. So don't call only when you have that nursing facility level of care. Call early on. Go to, someone mentioned earlier, a senior center. Go to a senior center, get social interaction, volunteer. Volunteerism is a great way to keep your health up and continue to provide services for others that hopefully staves off your need for those services. So great panel. I thank all of you. Anyone else have any additional comments that they want to make? We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I do say the Q&A does not have anything else.
I saw in the chat, Matt, that there were two other questions, and one was, aside from aid in attendance, what way and Medicaid would be to fund adult daycare. I'm not aware of any additional funding outside of those two resources, other than informally, sometimes if you have family members that are able to help supplement and split that cost, sometimes that's a practical resource. And I saw someone else had mentioned their family member paying $10,000 a month for in-home care. So I think this would be part of that discussion where, does it make sense financially maybe to be more at the assisted living and a memory care unit with a more sustainable cost level? That's certainly something to consider rather than the in-home care at that level.
Yeah. Matt, just to dovetail on what David said, for the issue about the adult daycare services, as I mentioned in my presentation, the Caregiver Support Program does offer financial reimbursement for respite care, which could include, a stay, a short stay at a facility, as David mentioned in his presentation, but also adult daycare, like a daily sort of thing, which would give caregivers that much needed respite. So that's available if someone qualifies. And as you mentioned, Matt, earlier, anyone interested in learning more about the Department of Aging's programs should contact their local AAA, which can be done by visiting the Department of Aging's website at www.aging.pa.gov or gov. And when you go on the homepage, you click on your local resources tab at the top of the screen, and then you select area agencies on aging in the drop-down box, and that will take you to an agency locator where if you put in your county, you can find the AAA nearest to you. And also you can learn about the department and its programs by visiting the Pennsylvania Department of Aging's Facebook page.
Thank you, Troy. Any other panelists have any other comments? Hearing none, I do want to thank again the Alzheimer's Association, the AARP, as well as Pennsylvania Association of Area Agencies on Aging for convening this. Some great information shared. We're several minutes ahead of schedule, but I will turn it over to Art DiLoretto.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thanks for facilitating such an informative panel. Again, it is Art DiLoretto from P4A, and I hope you've enjoyed today's symposium. And more importantly, I hope you found that the investment of your time was both informative and useful. On behalf of the Greater Pennsylvania and Delaware Valley chapters of the Alzheimer's Association, AARP Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania Association of Area Agencies on Aging, I thank you all for joining us today. We give particular thanks and special thanks to our moderators and to each of our panelists for sharing their time and insights with us throughout today's symposium. There's no doubt that caregivers for a loved one with dementia face special challenges. As dementia progresses, the caregiver's role changes, and it's important to learn what to expect and how to prepare. It's also important to take care of your own well-being and to connect with others that understand. Let us never forget, caregivers are members of our community, and as such, their welfare and their interests and their connectivity to community life is something that we can influence in a positive way if we bring all segments of our community together to support them and assist them through their journey. As we conclude today, you can expect to receive an email that will contain information on the resources available that can help you on your caregiving journey. In this email, you will also receive information on joining our advocacy efforts on behalf of those caregivers to make Pennsylvania's programs and services even better for people who need them. For example, the most recent improvements made to the caregiver support program that the Department of Aging discussed today happened because of those advocacy efforts. We hope you can consider these opportunities. Thank you again for being here and all that you do for caring for the loved ones in your life. We wish all of you the very best and a happy holiday season.